Welcome everybody to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today we have two new reviews for two new artists coming at you. Today we're going to be talking about two albums. They are St Vincent's new album, Daddy's Home. Anyway, we're also talking about Glacier Flower, August, and Masen's ambient music project. We're talking about Glacier Flower 2021, the third, I was about to say third studio album, but not quite there yet. Kind of.
I mean, technically, in the broadness of how that term is used now, it's not a fucking live album, so
yeah. Give me that live cover of Ambient 2, please. Yes, we're going to talk about August.
Glacier Flower bootleg. No, but yes.
Eventually, in the future.
We're going to talk about that.
I went on Soul Seek to pirate Glacier Flower 21.
yeah. Glacier Flower 21 yet to hit Soul Seek, and we hope it doesn't because, you know, Bandcamp for...
Pay for it, bitch.
Exactly. So we're going to be talking about those two records. But I also want to shout out a couple of things before we get into it. I've just started a Jams and Tea Instagram account, which you can go and follow, just to expand our social media reach, I guess. I am pretty, I don't really use Instagram that much, so I only realized on the third post that I should probably put like hashtags of like related terms in the post, so maybe it'll get picked up by people who don't already follow us. Which is like 17 people so far, but go and follow it. It's the same handle as our Twitter handle, which is Jams Tea Pod on Instagram and Twitter. If you're not already following us, please do. It helps us a lot to expand our reach. And yeah, we're still waiting to get algorithms, maybe one day, but we've been doing pretty well. We were reaching out on Reddit as well, and I've been considering the possibility of whether it might be worth having a Jams and Tea subreddit as well, but I haven't made that leap yet.
Can I plug something I've been working on, if that's all right?
Yeah, go for it. This is the plug time, baby.
Yeah, so I edit for our mutual friend Davey's YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Game Mechanics. We just put out a new video. It's on Abzu and also musicals. I think it's the best thing I've made with them.
Abzu and musicals. I cannot. If you told me make a Davey clone, that is the two things that I would put in the algorithm. Cloning his personality.
Yeah. Also kind of Gears of War 5 for a hot minute, but yeah.
So where can people go and find this, Serge? I guess we can put a link in the description.
Yeah, put a link in the description, or just look up Game Mechanics in YouTube and it'll come
Game Mechanics.
God, I was going to say it too, son of a bitch.
Game Mechanics it's the coding for life. It's not life itself.
Game Mechanics is a movie
Life is Strange. Life is Strange. What a car crash.
Fuck.
They didn't fix the car. Anyway,
did they finish?
Well, I mean, one of us did.
Welcome to the Jams and Tea podcast, where we have extended bits about Tyler jerking off.
We don't. That's not a thing. But also, obviously, we've been playing it from week to week. But if you haven't already, go and check out the new Glacier Flower record. There'll be a link to that in the description for this video as well.
Of course.
Support the artists. Sorry, my head's a bit flustered from the...
It's fine.
I wonder if Tyler has anything involved that came out in the midweek that we can plug.
Oh yeah, I also, thank you, I forgot completely that I did this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I did an interview with August and Masen, the creative team behind Glacier Flower as well. We tried to dig into the creative process of that record, and it was a good interview, I think, so there'll be a link to that in the description as well, which you can go and check out. Some really good insights that will definitely be, I think, informing, at least in some way, some of the discussion that we'll be having about the album today, which is going to be exciting. So yeah, go check that out. And yeah, I think that's basically it. What we've been listening to. Jake, what have you been listening to?
in the spirit of, I guess I've just decided, because we were reviewing August record, that I would listen to lots of August core this week for whatever reason. I've finally decided to take the plunge and listen to the works of one Mr. Brian Eno. I listened to Ambient 4 this morning, by the way, at your and Zach's recommendation, Tyler, which was very good. But the one I want to shout out is actually Ambient 2, because that was worked on with one Mr. Harold Budd, another electronic ambient artist, who listened to my favorite ambient, who made my favorite ambient work that I listened to this week, that being The Pearl. Him and Brian Eno, and I think maybe somebody else, but that is just it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous. If you like the shit that he did with Brian Eno on Ambient 2, you'll probably like this. It's that very dark, kind of solemn, spacious, empty ambient stuff that's very piano driven, like a lot of his stuff. It sounds very much like some of the stuff that he did with Cocteau Twins with The Moon and the Melodies, but also like the Mysterious Skin soundtrack that he did with Robin Guthrie. So yeah, that's fantastic. Go check that out. Lots of ambient music. I've listened to a bunch of stuff of his, and a bunch of stuff of Brian's, and I'm going to be doing more of that. On the note of something a little less, a little less good, I guess, is I listened to the new, just because I've been on a huge jazz kick, which has continued this week. I listened to the new Sons of Kemet album, which is fine. It's fine. I mean, it's good. It's just, I mean, maybe I've been setting my expectations a bit too high recently, as I've been injecting Miles Davis into my eyeballs and I have been snorting Alice Coltrane. But, you know, it's very, it's a little bit more, you know, contemporary. So it's a bit more, you know, modernized, fused with lots of spoken words, some hip hop stuff. It's just generally not as full compositionally. It's a bit sparse, and you know, I don't know, maybe I was just a bit more coming off the heels of I think it's Your Queen is a Reptile was their last album, which was very, very, very good. I can't help but be a little bit disappointed, kind of glad that we didn't cover that if we had the option to, just because there wouldn't really be much to say about it, at least on my end there wouldn't. But you know, go check that out. Maybe it'll hit for you where it didn't for me. I gave a listen to something that's shot into the upper echelons of my favorite records recently, which is the album Donuts by one Mr. Jay Dilla. God, that album fucking rules. I don't know why I never got around to it. Yes, see, synergy,
big brain.
The biggest of brains. Jay Dilla had the biggest of brains when he made Donuts, because my oh my, that album's just fun. Like I never figured I would get like really into instrumental hip hop or just that kind of avenue of music, but goddamn, I listened to this and I just couldn't really stop this week. That was like that, Glacier Flower 21 and The Pearl have just been like my constant 3 albums to rotate this week, and it's just been sumptuous. Get the flax of those, because my God, listening to Lightworks on FLAC, oh my, I saw the face of God.
Or
it was
you
rad.
Alternatively listen to it on a low-grade cassette and it's just as good. But I'm speaking for myself.
That grainy texture, it's tasty.
Yeah.
August, what have you been listening to?
Well. First thing, recommendation to me from a teacher of mine, that being the Polish black metal band Mgła, Exercises in Futility. This is an album with some really fiery drum performances, in particular from the band's drummer Dark Side. It's got a lot of really clever writing on it. I quite enjoyed it. It's good, in my opinion.
Dope shit.
On a completely different note, Bob Dylan's Bringing It All Back Home. And my first Bob Dylan record.
It's a good first record to pick.
Yeah.
Solid. it's a lot of like electronic-y blues stuff where he's using electric guitars. Of course, this album has Subterranean Homesick Blues and It's All Right Ma, which two just indisputably classic and great songs.
I would also ride for my favorite song on the record, which is Mr. Tambourine Man.
Oh, really?
That is also an absolute classic.
Yeah, I fucking adore. In fact, I'd say the B side of that record, which is just the last 4 songs, is maybe the best side. Oh, maybe I would put the A side of Blood on the Tracks.
Yeah, I was about to say.
But that B side of Bringing It All Back Home is just incredible. But yeah, anyway, continue.
No, I guess I was a little more mixed on some of it. It's I enjoyed parts of it, didn't enjoy other parts of it. Like there's some songs where he just does the same guitar riff, like he does like blues and E like 3 times, and it's like
I'm still confident there'll be a Dylan album that August will like love, just because the man has too many albums that are like that good to not. Like mathematically, it's basically impossible for every given person to not want to love at least one.
No, it's really weird. I haven't listened to any Dylan this week, but my favorite music writer, Stephen Hayden, published a full ranking of all like 39 Bob Dylan albums. And he's like one of the world's biggest Bob Dylan fans, and he wrote extensively about them. And I just was, because I love Stephen's writing, so I read the whole thing, even though I've only heard about 6 or 7 Bob Dylan albums. And it just made me want to listen to so like half the discography. Because he sounds like he's a really interesting artist, even when he's kind of like doing something that isn't all that great, because he's such a fascinating figure and a fascinating writer. But yeah, I think my money would be on the record August enjoying most. It's pretty predictable, but I think my money would have to go on to Blood on the Tracks. But also Highway 61 Revisited is just such an immediate.
That was the other one.
Such an immediate record.
Man's released Bringing It All Back Home and Highway 61 in the same year.
Yeah, I think you'll definitely
6 months apart.
I think you'll
God
definitely.
Damn.
I think you'll definitely enjoy Highway 61 more than Bring It All Back Home, because it trims some of the kind of more inconsequential moments of that record, but it also turns up the absurdity as well. Like it's a really like some of the writing on those late 60s records.
Oh, it's just like weird lyrics. I'm in.
I mean, one of the most iconic lines on that whole album is just Bob Dylan screaming at the top of his voice, "The sun's not yellow, it's chicken."
Oh, I see, Mr. Dylan. I may have to reconsider my stance on you.
If you don't love Desolation Row, I mean, like as a rule, I have to smack you.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anyway,
that's not
right.
personal. That is applicable to everyone.
No, I will accept that. I will accept that, and I'll get back to you on that whenever I get to that album. Speaking of albums,
which is indeed what we do.
Segues.
Dream Theater's Awake was another one I gave some further listening to. I find it a bit of a mixed bag. There's a lot of great songs on there that are unquestionably amazing, performances unquestionably amazing, but then you got tracks like The Mirror with lines like "My will or my won't." Just
Ever since you talked about how that's like a 90s Rush line, I hear that in Geddy Lee's voice whenever it like broaches my consciousness, and it's really funny.
Yeah, I said this in a tweet like months ago now, but Dream Theater has exactly 2 lyrically interesting records.
Yeah, I kind of just ride with, I mean, not that August isn't doing this as well, but I kind of just ride with a lot of the goofiness and I mean, it's just all part and parcel of like the fucking, just because they're just a fundamentally ridiculous band in every way. And that's what's so like captivating about them, I guess. It's just that absolute sense of, it's tiring as hell, especially when their albums go on for 80 minutes.
Especially on The Astonishing, which I've listened to.
But like, but yeah, I do have a level of patience for Awake. It's definitely a flawed record, but there's just so many fucking like the whole Mind Beside Itself suite is just awesome.
That suite's awesome. I won't disagree there for a second.
And I'll also
Remember
shout
when-
out two of my favorite Dream Theater songs that I've heard so far, which is Innocence Faded and Space Divest. Love both of those tracks.
Remember when years ago Jake was like, "Man, I just don't think I get Dream Theater." I'm like, "What have you heard?" And he's like, "The Astonishing."
That was my first Dream Theater album, was The Astonishing.
How unfortunate.
Yeah,
I know, right?
How
I wouldn't get it
embarrassing.
either.
There we go.
Embarrassing.
So yeah, continuing down the list, listened to a classic progressive rock record, Magma's Mechanic Destructive Commando. Magma
name.
are a band I've always had some interest in, and I tried this record out, and kind of the big appeal of their music is that it's this really over-the-top progressive rock with lyrics spoken in a made-up language. And it's the kind of thing I imagine Tyler enjoying a lot.
Yeah, I'm
because
looking at their page now. And
there's
and
a
they-
fair
I
bit
thought you said that, and I'm like, that sounds like August and Tyler shit, all right.
there's a fair bit of, I think, almost crossover with some of the appeal of Cardiacs in a sense. I found this record a little hard to get into fully at points because it's just an album where it's like this 30-minute kind of song divided into different pieces where I just found myself struggling to get into a little of the emotion behind it and really connect with it on that level. But I wouldn't deny it's still a really well put together, exciting, progressive rock album. Final thing, Kraftwerk's Radioactivity. I listened to this because of their induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh.
And this is a really, it's kind of like a proto synth pop album in a sense. Kind of strays away from a bit of their more ambient tendencies on Autobahn. And I enjoyed it a fair bit. There were some really cool ideas. I think the record's biggest issue being that these ideas just don't go on for long enough, even though I find them really fascinating and interesting. Manipulations of sound, and there's also a couple of ideas that are just not amazing, where they'll just like play this one high-pitched tone for like the whole song.
Yeah,
it's annoying.
They hadn't quite found incidentally Kraftwerk were like one of the first. Like I was listening to, my dad was playing Kraftwerk to me. This is a classic Tyler moment here. My dad was playing Kraftwerk to me when I was in fucking kindergarten.
Jesus Christ.
They're my dad's favorite electronic music act of all time. And Radioactivity is like, I basically agree with you. I think I basically feel exactly the same. But it has like some amazing songs on that record as well.
I wouldn't deny that. Like
the title track is fantastic.
Title track, I love that song. It's so fun.
Radioland is great as well, and Om Sweet Om too. I really love.
Yeah, I really like the intro track, Geiger Counter, and that's kind of a perfect example of I wish you did more with that, because I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, it wasn't, I think, until because obviously the year before they put out Autobahn, which obviously has one of the greatest A-sides of all of electronic music. And then the B-side of that record is kind of like, there's some interesting ideas here, but it's like that record's so overwhelmed by the title track.
Yeah, that's exactly how I would characterize Autobahn as well.
And Radioactivity kind of has a similar issue where it's like it's less obvious because the great tracks on the album are staggered across it more.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree.
It wasn't until like the next album, I think, Trans-Europe Express, where they really like figured out how to make a full album experience captivating. And then my dark horse pick for their best album, The Man Machine, is I think the peak of that. But if you want I don't know if you've heard this one, but if you want like proto synth pop from Kraftwerk, have you heard Computer Love? Computer
I
World,
have-
sorry.
I have not. No.
Okay, that I think takes their proto synth pop thing the furthest of any of their albums.
Okay.
And I suspect you'll really dig that record. It's incredibly melodic and warm, but also distinctly like robotic in the way that Kraftwerk always are.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful album.
I'm really excited to dig further into their discography now that I'm past kind of the warming up phase of it, so to speak.
Yeah, totally.
That's been my week.
There's really only 3 things I want to highlight in this section, 2 of which are by the same artist, that being the classic post-hardcore group Glassjaw.
Ooh,
2 albums
yeah.
being Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Silence and Worship and Tribute. I would in particular recommend these to August for a handful of reasons. One being that they were both produced by Relationship of Command producer Ross Robinson. Absolutely stellar production on both of those albums. The other being they were very visibly a huge influence on bands like Thursday and Thrice, which I know you enjoy at least some of the work of.
Yeah.
And the other is the lead singer has I wouldn't say it's Cedric-like, because it's not really, but it is just as captivating a vocal style and a lyrical way of phrasing things. Liked both of those albums a whole lot. And the other one I will mention is Daughters, You Won't Get What You Want, a record that I avoided like the plague for years because Fantano gave it a 10, and I didn't want to think about it or talk to anyone who heard it with any sort of informed opinion. But yeah, he was right. He made sense.
Yes.
I can't beat around the bush on that, nor would I want to. This shit is just
Hard.
yeah, it just goes. It's like if
City is an empty glass.
it's like if
Oh,
nasty. It's like if Swans were 30 again, and in contemporary times, and just mad as hell and sad.
The
as hell.
guitar tones on The Flammable Man, just the track that just goes fucking batshit crazy for 2 minutes is the fucking I die. I just fucking die. Something burning in here isn't me.
Yeah, it's there's a lot going on there.
I
Mhm.
laid it into my bed.
Oh my god, that was frighteningly good.
Do not like
That
that.
fucking-
Goodbye.
The backing vocals on that track.
Down.
The backing vocals on that track, just like
Yeah,
Because
that
I didn't
that
expect. I didn't expect a song on this album to remind me of "Bad to the Bone," but you know,
yeah, right. It's like bluesy
Uh-huh.
as well. It's just so fucking good.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Anyway, what have I been listening to?
Yeah.
The answer is the Smashing Pumpkins,
Mm.
amongst other things. And then just Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. It's like 2 hours. I was basically live DMing it to Jake as I was listening to it. There's a song on side 2 that like sounds like a metal song, and I didn't know what to do with it. But it's amazing.
There are
And
a few of those.
the whole record is like that, where it's like, I don't know why you did this, but I love it.
This is meant as a positive, but Melancholy is a really good example of how a record can have obvious filler and also just be a 10 out of 10 album. Like it's
Mhm.
it's just an album where the experience overwhelms any kind of like individual qualms or renders them kind of redundant in a certain sense, because the whole thing
It does
is about,
help that every song is just great.
yeah, like but
Even if it's filler, it's still
Porcelina of
great.
the Vast Oceans doesn't need to be 9 minutes long, but I'm not complaining that it is.
I wouldn't
it's
shorten
not
it.
even. it's not so much that there's filler on the album, is that there's filler in songs on occasion.
Right.
Yeah, but like, who cares, right? When you've got,
but also just I just it's you didn't. If I mean, did we write 1979? No.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Or-
it's like I didn't do
Fuck up.
tonight.
or
So
my
fucking-
personal favorite on the record that doesn't get as much love as those tracks, but should 33, one of the best ever Pumpkin songs. And just generally, I want to shout out as well the final stretch of the second half of that record as well as some of the most beautiful music that they ever put to tape. By Starlight in particular is one of my favorite songs on that record too.
God, what a beautiful song.
Yeah.
Oh
Jelly
my
Belly
God.
has the best guitar tone I've ever heard in my life, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it's ironic because, like, of course, I know the hits from it, right? So I knew 1979, and I knew A Bullet.
The world is a vampire.
Now Santa Drain.
Also, I'm gonna embarrass myself a little bit here and say that 15-year-old me's favorite song on the album was Zero.
It's better than Bullet with Butterfly Wings.
Yeah,
15-year-old me would fucking blast Zero on repeat, and I would just it's like such. It's one of the most like
I mean,
cringy
it
songs on the
goes.
record, but it does go. Like it's absolutely. And there's one song like.
She's all I really need.
Look, Billy Corgan has always been cringy. It's just,
only.
it's factual, but it doesn't matter because the music's great.
Yeah, I mean, the things I can understand why the comment about Bullet with Butterfly Wings was made. I just I've always loved that song even before I listened to the.
Oh, it's a great song.
I'm still
Just ready to the fucking stink he puts on the R when he goes rat in a cage is fucking like.
Yeah,
I love it.
I didn't think that song would like work with the whole album. This is really long album that explores like really dream poppy areas and chamber poppy areas and just lots of different things, right? And I didn't think a song that's that like mainstream grunge banger would fit, but it does because it's just like this amazing like this gumbo of crap.
Yeah, I mean the album simply has no limitations, so everything fits.
Yes.
It's also worth saying, I think Adore is incredible, and I think more people should be talking about it because it is
Correct.
incredibly.
People are saying this.
It's pretty dope.
Morgan, that's your favorite, isn't it?
Yes.
That's pretty dope.
I was
not to-
surprised, but
Just put on the hipster glasses. Adore is actually the best of the original Smashing Pumpkins run because you see,
Hipster voice is Cartman.
Mom, where's my cheesy poos? No kidding.
Carry on.
I simply think that For Martha is my favorite Smashing Pumpkins song.
That's a good one.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I had a similar response to the opening track to Sheila, which was always kind of overshadowed by the run.
Right.
Oh, the stupid run of Ava Adore to Crestfallen, which is just a 10.
You're the one
nine,
that I
a
adore.
10.
You'll always be my whore. We must never be apart.
I have to stop
Tyler
doing
is
that.
fucking like he just becomes a cartoon character. He sounds like one of actually no. Tyler sounds like one of the animated characters at the end of Pink Floyd's The Wall, and Morgan sounds like just the lead singer of Pink Floyd's The Wall.
You are guilty of having feelings. Feelings. Oh my god. No, like I get you. Like when I was sort of 15, 16-year-old and into the kind of like rock and sort of pop punk was coming out then, and like listening to Cherub Rock for the first time around then.
Oh
just,
yeah.
ooh,
God,
Yeah.
that's such a
Change-
fucking life-changing opening track.
Yeah.
Fuck.
wow.
There's a
Every
video
single second of
of-
this bit is cut.
Let me out!
Saoirse, what other album did
Come
you
back
listen
in
to?
3 minutes. I listened to another Morgan favorite this week, that being
Oh?
Insomniac by Green Day.
Oh, that's
Oh.
that good.
W-
That's that
Whoa.
good.
Just half an hour of really better pop punk bangers. Ah,
Yeah.
Ah.
That is my favorite Green Day album.
it's a good choice,
Yes.
sir.
It is
Man.
it is a left field choice because literally not a goddamn person speaks on it, which is why I didn't listen to it until like a month ago and was like, no, this is the one.
I have
It's this one.
ever since I watched, I'm sure this is what prompted it for Saoirse as well. But
Is
ever
it
since
Mike
I
the
watched,
Snare?
Yeah, ever since I watched that video,
It was, yes.
I've only heard 3 Green Day, no, 4, I guess, if you count Father of All. I always forget about that. I've only heard
Why should we? No.
I've only heard 4 in full, which are that one, Dookie, American Idiot, and 21st Century Breakdown. I just have the feeling, I have the feeling that I haven't heard my favorite Green Day album yet. I just have that feeling.
That's probably correct.
Warning.
So
I bet
yeah,
it'll be warning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we'll see. I'm very much looking
Depends.
forward to.
Tyler would like be the weirdo who rides for Nimrod like really hard.
Yeah, I could see that happen. Nimrod's
Yeah,
not
it's
like
cool.
bad or anything. It's good, but like,
No.
it's like
It's very good.
Yeah.
It's just
My favorite
Weird.
Green Day record is Kaplunk. No.
No, that I'm sure there are people who have that opinion too.
But yeah, no. Insomniac. I think it's like really clear that they are really pissed about the reaction from the fan base after Dookie, because this is like a bitter, angry record, and it's why it's great. Like,
yeah.
would you have the fucking like breakdown with the open strings outside of the power chords on Brain Stew on Dookie? No, you wouldn't.
I miss pissed off
God.
Green Day. Like, get angry
same.
about something, for fuck's sake.
I miss Green Day.
Yeah. They haven't made an album in what,
I think-
fucking 16 years?
I think the story of Green Day is a really good way of confronting the fact that it's just an inescapable truth, really, that once certain artists that trade in a certain type and style pass a certain age or a certain stage in their life, it's just not gonna come back. It just isn't. And it's one of the hardest things to learn as you kind
It's
of
the
grow
sick
up.
boy monologue in Train Spotting where they go out and shoot people on the veranda, on the green veranda. It's like,
Yeah.
Ludi
She the
had
bitch.
it. He lost it. Sorry. Anyway, another album is Talon of the Hawk by the Front Bottoms, which is sort of more on the folky end of that pop punk thing.
I saw 2 people talking about that album who weren't you on my timeline this week. That's so weird.
Crazy. Yeah, it's not the deepest record they've made, and they're not a very deep band, but it just bangs. It goes very hard. It doesn't go hard. It's just a lot of fun. It's like songs like Skeleton are just so much fun. But then there's Twin Size Mattress, which is the best song they've ever made, and it makes me cry. Like when it's this song about, like, I don't know who amongst this podcast has heard it, but it's basically this song about this guy who's like looking back at a person they could have saved from a lot of trouble and regretting it. And then the refrain goes, she hopes I'm cursed forever to sleep on a twin-size mattress on somebody's attic or basement my whole life, never graduating up in size or to add another, and my nightmares will have nightmares all my life. And it's just...
That's some Third Eye Blind shit.
I just noticed that that song Twin Size Mattress on the Talon of the Hawk Rate Your Music page has a 4.5 track rating average, which is like literally only hundreds of songs ever have a rating that high, which is pretty impressive for a kind of folk punk indie rock band on Rate Your Music. So I will be checking.
Yeah.
I will be listening.
Yeah, especially because the album I think is a 3.2 on Radio Music.
Yeah, that's
Something like that.
that's about right for
sounds right.
for a folk punk band on that website.
Yeah.
Anyway, so
Shit.
I have not been listening to very much new music this week at all. In fact, only really 2 records I want to shout out in terms of first listens. The first one is a record that I finally checked out with hot anticipation, considering that two members of this podcast had sung its praises to the high heavens, and that is Porter Robinson's album Nurture, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Absolutely beautiful pop record. How I would describe it is there are a lot of different kind of musical reference points that came to mind when I was listening to it. But the first way I would describe it is kind of like if John Hopkins produced a 1975 record. It has that. No, seriously, and that is
no, you're not wrong.
That is a compliment, because the particular synth pop stylings and sort of vocal croonings of this record remind me of everything I love about the softer moments on the best 1975 records. It's the same sort of emotional tenor, but this record is just like purely unabashedly joyous and not really about anything except for that feeling. And it's just lovely. It's just lovely is the best way of describing it. I have listened to it twice this week, and I just adore it. There's a lot of great songs on it. The one that particularly stands out to me is Musician.
I knew you were going to say Musician. I fucking love that song.
Which is one of my favorite pop songs of the year so far. But yeah, it's maybe the record is a tad long, but I mean, that's such a hollow criticism when I enjoy it as much as I do.
Agree.
It's just really, if you want something that is very sounds great, is really luxurious and good headphones, but is also like quite chill and relaxing, is not going to like demand too much of your brain, then it's a fantastic thing to throw on.
Also just really uplifting too. Like, I mean, a lot of the music we tend to gravitate towards is very dour and sad, and that's just one album where I'm like fully able to get on board with the fact that it's very like, it has darkness in it obviously, but it's still just it reminds me of the Crying album, Beyond the Fleeting Gales, a lot, honestly.
I can definitely see that. The other artists that remind me of quite heavily, and I think I'm the only person who's listened to this artist, but if you like this record, you will like this artist. Reminded me a lot of the electronic pop artist Baths, who makes very similar music except much more gay and much sadder.
Cool.
But also like has the same kind of bright, twinkly, pretty, and then when it needs to be also quite heavy and even industrial at points, sort of electronic pop music. So yeah, that's my recommendation if you like this record, is listen to Baths, any Baths album. But yeah, no, I dug the shit out of this album, and I guess you guys probably got so like swept up in all the things that you had been listening to. It didn't get mentioned last week, but I know you guys were both fans of it.
Yeah, it's up there for me for releases this year. It was my second favorite album of the year.
Dope shit. So yeah, that album gets definitely a tick from me. Other record I want to shout out is I just listened to this yesterday. It is Stereogum's album of the week for this week. It is a sort of sensual, incredibly pretty and sultry and smooth R&B record from an artist called Erica DeCassier. It's called Sensational. It's a very low-key, minimal record, but she has a great voice, and there are some really fantastic songs in there. It's not a great album as a whole, I don't think, but the singles on this record in particular are excellent, and it conjures a very specific sensual R&B vibe, and it doesn't ever compromise on that. And it's a reasonably short record too. So if that sounds like your jam, definitely throw it on. It's definitely worth your time. Really enjoyed that. In terms of other listens this week, I won't spend too much time because really my week has been mostly dominated by re-listening to the various records of Jimmy Eat World in preparation for our Clarity discussion review video. I intended with this week to dive deeper into their later discography, but I just never ended up getting around to it because I just ended up spinning Clarity, Bleed American, and Futures over and over and over
Futures.
And yeah, I want to take a specific moment to recommend Futures to Saoirse if you haven't heard it, because that is the heaviest Jimmy Eat World album, and I think you'll really dig that aspect of it. From the opening seconds of that album, like the opening track is just one of the most fucking burst your fucking door down openers ever. It just like fucking
Always believe in futures.
from the first like that's one of those albums. Futures is one of those albums where you're 2 seconds into it and you know it's a great album because it just does not hesitate. And then there's so many great songs on that record that I absolutely adore. I Want to Ride in particular for Drugs or Me, which is a ballad.
Yes.
It has the lowest track rating on the album by far on Rate Your Music. And I know, I'm mad.
My favorite Jimmy Eat World song. Get fucked.
Oh, dope. Awesome take. But yeah, it's a beautiful song. It's particularly resonant. It's just in a very incredibly direct song about trying to communicate with someone you love who is in the throes of an addiction and trying to get them to see that they basically their only opportunity of like being happy again is in their hands, and they have to kind of make a very important step towards that, and you can't make that step for them. They have to do it. It's a very, very moving song. I won't lie, I wept listening to it multiple times this week. And that album in general is just the thing about Jimmy Eat World, and it's more apparent I guess on Bleed American and this record than it is on Clarity, but they are very, and specifically Jim Adkins is a very kind of direct writer. He does not, he's a very eloquent and great writer. And one of the strengths of Clarity, as we'll get into, is how beautifully written that record is. But also he knows how to cut through effectively with a very direct lyricism when he needs to. And that is one of the things that could easily drag the songs off the rails, but doesn't because of the heart that goes into the songs on that record. It's just so earnest and unflinching. And yeah, Futures is just jams from front to back. Bleed American has always been, I like Bleed American a lot. It's always been the kind of like dark sheep of that era for me because I don't like it as much as I like Clarity and Futures, but it definitely has, I think coming back to it this week, because I originally had it at a 6 out of 10, and coming back to it this week, I definitely appreciated it more. And that's, I guess, been the narrative of this week for me, is like, I got into Jimmy Eat World when I was a teenager, liked them a lot, but never had that kind of ultimate connection forged with them that I had with a lot of my favorite emo bands. And I have to say that changed in a dramatic way this week. I think it's fair to say that I've probably spent like, I don't even fucking know, like 20 hours of this whole week just listening to this band. I've been playing these records over and over and over and over and over and over, and just I'll get into it when we do our Clarity discussion, but something shifted, man. Like this was something happened to me this week with this band, and and revisiting those 3 records, but especially having a godly moment with Clarity has made a significant difference to my life, as over the top as that sounds. But yeah, so okay, so now let's move on to our first of our 2 new releases reviews today, and the first album we're going to be discussing is
I signed autographs in my visitation room.
For obvious reasons, I feel particularly equipped to contextualize this, considering that I'm the biggest kind of indie kid of the podcast, and St Vincent is sort of an indie superstar in some respects.
I don't think anybody here knows more about her than you, I would wager.
And look, to give credit where it's due, this is the 6th St Vincent album, and it comes with, I would say, the most radical shift in sound of her entire career, and also I think the most compelling narrative thrust of any of her records, conceptually anyway. In many ways, for me, following the rollout of this record, the rollout of this record I found so interesting just from a pure like music journalism perspective, that it almost felt inevitable that the record itself would not live up to the sensationalism of that rollout. And I'll kind of get into that. But having grown up an indie kid at heart and experiencing the rollouts of the last 2 St Vincent records in real time, I do feel a weird sense of allegiance to her, or at least a continuing interest anyway, even as her own musical path divulges more and more from the initial stuff that made her so compelling to me, specifically the absolutely shredding guitar work on albums like Actor and Strange Mercy, which those two records remain her best. Although the record I kind of discovered her with when it came out was the her self-titled album, which has some absolutely incredible shredding on it as well. And as a record that, even though it's not as good as Actor or Strange Mercy on the whole, I still have a pretty nostalgic connection to because of how hard some of those singles bang. Birth in Reverse in particular is just an absolutely fucking incendiary song. Some of the best guitar work on any 2010 song. I don't say that lightly. But with her last album, 2017's Mass Seduction, she made a pretty marked shift away from those indie rock roots into a slicker pop sheen that I think she wore reasonably well for the most part, though at points on that record it did feel like something was missing, especially kind of as that record got into its back half and she started drifting more into kind of ballads, which I think are not her strong suit. Frankly, she's much better when she's really kind of going at the music with some tangible grit and, like I say, shredding. But I still think that for as marked as a shift as she made on that record from the one before it, she pulled off the best parts of it really damn well. Some great songs on that album. And also I think the strength of St. Vincent that's carried through is that she has remained committed to the idea of kind of conceptualizing herself in a unique way with each album as well, like shifting or developing, probably is a better word, the idea of like who St. Vincent is as an artist, like and as an image. Like on Mass Seduction, she was this futuristic dominatrix who was clad in leather and would cave your head in with her pop arrangements if she wanted to. And her music has always had this kind of like sharpness to it, like a kind of what she described as like angularity, which I think is obviously a very technical word, but I think is a good description of how those records sound. Like the guitars and the synths are serrating on those albums. And I think with Daddy's Home, she's kind of made a pretty, I think, glaring shift away from that style. This is a much, although there is kind of some of that sort of angularity and harshness to some of the synthesizer stuff on this record, I think, and some of the vocal performances too. For the most part, this is a much kind of softer and more soulful St. Vincent. And this is the position that I've been in on this podcast frequently in the last few weeks, where I know that I like this record more than everyone else here. I know that. I don't love this record either, which is kind of annoying, because if you all hated it and I loved it, then that could be really interesting potential for us to like properly clash on certain things. But I'm kind of again in that frustrating middle ground where I think there's some stuff on this record I like quite a bit. But there's also parts of the record that let it down don't really, like, they don't fail in interesting ways. They're just kind of a bit dull. And
the great thing about that is that even though I think it's fine, I don't love it, I still think there's a lot to say.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from, again, some of that conceptual stuff, which I'm going to get into. And there's definitely obviously a really strong case for, if your record's strongest aspect is its conceptual stuff and its background, then that's not good. And that's a fair take as well. And I probably agree with that to a certain extent. But I do think the extent to which the conceptual stuff and the rollout for this album have impacted the way I've experienced this album is a valid part of why I do enjoy some of this record, and more broadly kind of what it's going for. And I do think that, as has been the case for St. Vincent, she is committed to integrating the conceptual ideas of the record into its actual sound, rather than just wearing them as window dressing. I think even if you hate this album, I would be surprised if anyone accused St. Vincent of just kind of like adopting certain genre signifiers as these, like, in a really facile way. She really immerses herself into the 70s funk and soul and rock stuff that she's kind of adopting, and she really like goes full on with it. And that I think is, admirable. And I think you get a lot of artists who maybe would adopt it in a kind of a half measure way, where you kind of incorporate maybe a bit of funk guitar licks in some song and just leave it at that. She really goes full bore, and it's both to the record's strength and also to its detriment at certain points as well. And so I guess I'll get into the concept now, and then maybe take a step back before I really dive into specific songs. But the concept here is one that Annie Clark, which is St Vincent's real name, attacks indirectly, but has given enough specific detail about to fill in the blanks of these songs. Basically, her father is a white-collar criminal, and currently in prison for embezzling hundreds of millions of dollars, and she no longer has a relationship with him. She did have a relationship with him for a period of time after he was imprisoned, which was over a decade ago, I believe. And there are certain songs on this record which deals with the fractured nature of that relationship and just a general sense of distance from her father growing. I think this is alluded to most directly on the title track of the album, which I think is a good example of the sonic direction of the record, and also why I'm not really surprised that it's been divisive. This is 70s funk and soul pastiche, crafted lovingly and immersed with dedication in that era. And I'm not sure that's not coincidentally, because it was the era her father came of age in. And this record, in a certain way, more broadly than directly, seems to be Annie seeking to understand him and try and come to terms with her complicated feelings about where their relationship has left her in life and where she is at this current juncture as a creative musician, and the sort of struggle that she's experiencing on multiple levels. There's some nice detail in that title track lyrically. She alludes to visiting him in prison, and then other prison inmates asking for her autograph, and the dynamic that creates, which I think is a nice image that she kind of touches on. And another aspect of the rollout of this album that has been interesting to me is the fact that, and this is, I guess, where a lot of people probably got off the train before the album even came out, is that she famously, okay, so she did an interview, I think, with, I can't remember if the name of the magazine was released, but basically she did an interview, did a lot of interviews in the rollout of this record, but there was one specific interview she did. But apparently behind the scenes, so in this interview, she was asked some specific questions about her relationship with her father, and she was taken aback by them, despite the fact that in the press release for this album, her relationship with her father was directly mentioned as a core part of the concept of the record. So justifiably, in my opinion, the music journalist asked her to elaborate on that, and she wasn't very pleased about being asked that question, tried to evade it, and then after the interview was complete, behind the scenes, she had her representative pull the interview basically and say, I don't want this published. Please do not publish this. And then the interviewer instead published the interview on her blog instead. And it turns out, I've read the interview, the actual question that is asked and the response is a bit awkward, but it's not really all that invasive, I don't think. So the general consensus is that St. Vincent had a disproportionate response to an awkward encounter that created a friction between her and the music media. And all of this might sound like, irrelevant window dressing, but I think when St. Vincent as an idea and as a musician has been so influenced by her place and her embracement in the world of indie, this kind of more, I guess, fractious relationship that she seems to be developing with that world that is encapsulated by the sound of this record, I think, the way it kind of drifts away from the stuff that she was initially praised for, is an interesting bit of context, I think. Basically, St. Vincent is adopting this I guess, not necessarily personality, but like this less, I'm not going to take any bullshit at this point. I'm trying to completely direct my own narrative. And as a result, she's come off like a bit of an asshole in that rollout. I think what she's trying to go for is best encapsulated in a song like one of the highlights on this record, which is, let me find it, Down, which is a song that absolutely slaps. It's fiery. It feels like the fullest realization of Annie marrying the emotional ideas of the album with the musical template. And it's the only real song on the record that I think carries the specific energy of those earlier records that I really love, where you can hear a genuine like spite and stank in her voice. Whereas there are other points on the record where I think she tries to do a similar thing, but hits up on some severe limitations in her vocal ability and also just her ability to fit the mold of these different kind of like musical icon personalities that she's trying to, adopt. So, I mean, I'll get more into it, but I don't want to do my whole review at once. So I'll take a step back at this point. I know that you guys are not really keen on this record at all, but I would like to hear specifically what about it rubs you guys the wrong way, or what you think is poor or misguided about the execution of this record.
Something I think that is really interesting about this album, and that's the thing, even though I like the album but think it's fine, I am fascinated by it. And one of the things I think is really interesting about it is the way in which the sort of true to life concept is approached with elements of artifice in a way. And this is contextualized for me by the fact that mass seduction, to pronounce it properly, I guess, was that was my getting on board album with St Vincent. And so that hyper energy, crazy pop, guitar driven pop music was my introduction to St Vincent. And at least on the singles, I loved it.
Yeah, the singles on that record are fantastic. I won't disagree.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But I can understand why, maybe slow tracks and that style might not work. But my point is more that the direction of this was particularly jarring, but I don't feel like it's less artifice laden. Even though St. Vincent has talked about taking control of the narrative,
That's the thing about St. Vincent, though. Like, all her music and just the way she crafts her kind of sound design in her albums is lathered in that feeling of like artifice, of like, inorganicness. Like, nothing on her records feels like, well, with the exception of this record, I think, which is a kind of weird drift towards trying to create a more organic, again, very 70s sound. But like her music, even though it's always been like rock music or pop music, has always had a kind of electronic sheen to it that I think obviously is all over Mass Seduction, but even her less poppy, more rock driven records prior to that. And which is what makes her decision to kind of shed some of that artificiality in some ways and then embrace other forms of it on this record.
Right.
So interesting.
Right. Like before, it was like the music was very artificial, but here it's like the way in which a real life story is approached is like separated by layers of artificialized characters and like genre framing in a way. Like you can tell by the style of the music, you can tell by the cover. St. Vincent is almost like framing herself as like a femme fatale in like a Fritz Lang Hollywood noir film, like the stylings of this album feel for me like they could be happening in like a lounge bar in like Elevator to the Gallows. I feel like there's a lot of like also Miles Davis's soundtrack to Elevator to the Gallows in this record in a way.
You just saying lounge bar, even though these two records don't sound a thing alike. This shift just made me think of what Arctic Monkeys did on their last record, how they kind of moved very drastically away from this kind of like template they wore incredibly well to just adopt this drastically different style, sound, personality, conceptual sheen to that last record that they made. And it was like all of these things about it made it super interesting. But musically, it was sort of lacking. Like it felt like they got so into the conceptual ideas of it that the end result of that was music that could only sound the way it does and doesn't necessarily captivate in the way that the best sort of stuff in that band does. And I think Daddy's Home has a similar problem.
Yeah, I mean, I felt a similar way about that Arctic Monkeys record. I actually think if you want to look for a great comparison to how this sounds musically in the Arctic Monkeys catalog, some of the songs on AM are like super there, Do I Want to Know, or something like that. It's got that creeping midnight feel. But I just want to know, like, what Annie Clark's father is like thinking. Well, my daughter's singing about how she doesn't have a relationship with me anymore. She's doing it in character.
Yeah, I mean that's her.
Yeah.
To Annie's credit, I think an easy thing to overlook about this record, and maybe something that she deliberately disguises, is that there are moments across this record where Annie does, I think, get quite nakedly personal. She maybe dresses it up a little bit, but some of my favorite moments on this record are moments where I think there's a real kind of tangible emotionality to what she's singing about. In fact, my favorite song on this record, it's a bit of a deep cut, is what's it called? At the Holiday Party, where she's kind of going for a Joni Mitchell tone with her singing, and it's more stripped back, and she's but it has enough kind of thrust, I think, to carry it through where other tracks in a similar vein lack it. There's a mix of horn synthesizer songs that sound great, and the sentiment of the track is Annie kind of reaching out to an old friend who is struggling in a way that's familiar to her, but doing their best to hide it. And it's a really kind of genuine and moving moment on the record because Annie strips back a lot of the faux ironic pastiche of other parts of the record. It reminded me of a similar moment on Mass Seduction, the song Happy Birthday Johnny, which is my favorite song on that record as well, where she does the same thing. She strips back all of the artificial stuff to just directly reach out to this person who is struggling and say, I hope you're okay. I haven't spoken to you in a long time and I hope you're doing all right. And that kind of stuff is beautiful, but it also is sort of at odds with a lot of what the record is going for. And so you get to this position where the stuff I like the most about the record, even though it's weirdly contradictory, even though I like the conceptual idea of the record and what St. Vincent is doing, my favorite parts of the album as music are the parts where she's kind of not leaning into that.
Right. I mean, in a way, like, that encapsulates sort of what's happening on this record. Whilst I think there are moments where this does really work for me, the opener and the title track especially, also Living the Dream, I feel like more often than I really want it to, it feels very concerned with the idea, and less with necessarily really fleshing out the songwriting ideas, for me at least.
Yeah, it's almost as if the key tracks on the record, in terms of like the key songs and what the record is about, lean so far into the pastiche that she's doing that they almost become just like, it's almost like an uncanny valley thing where she goes so far into the pastiche. And I'll deviate from your opinion on the opening track, which I think is not very good at all. And I think
sucks.
Fair enough.
Not an
awful.
unpopular opinion here.
Yeah. I think that's a moment where she lathers on the artifice and she leans into what she's doing so hard that it's almost like, it almost feels a bit embarrassing to listen to. And I get what she's, I actually like the chorus. I like the chorus hook that she does. I think that's kind of cool. But a lot of her vocal phrasing on that song is just, no thanks.
Yeah, like, I'm not going to be, like,
Cringe.
there are plenty of, cringe, there's no other word for it. I'm cringing. Sorry. There are plenty of couplets on this record that made me not want to exist anymore, and that was a real stumbling block for me.
No, fair enough. Yeah, and that's the thing as well, is she kind of, I think that Pay Your Way in Pain really kind of left a sour taste in my mouth with regard to this record. And I do think that for the most part, I will say it's not even my least favorite song on this record, but for the most part, I do think the record does have more successful executions of what she's going for than that. It's just, yeah, it's real. I think maybe she's intentionally trying to be as jarring as possible, because it was the lead single as well. She's intentionally trying to be as jarring as possible, because that's, what artists do as well. They want to like really throw your expectations. But it's just a noble failure of a song, I think. And I respect the attempt. It just doesn't land in that instance. But okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm curious to hear from, well, Jake, you're unmuted and not eating at the moment. So why don't you leap in here with what you feel at this point?
Look, I feel like, again, we've telegraphed this fact, so it's not exactly surprising. I don't like this album, and frankly, I saw it coming even before, just because like it's not like it's very important to remember. I don't give a flying fuck about St. Vincent. And I don't mean that in the sense that I don't care about her as an artist. It's just that I've listened to 2 acclaimed albums from her and I thought they were good. And then that was just like it. But this whole like rigmarole about her and these interviews and like all of this shit in the like I don't give a fuck. Like not a single one, couldn't pay me to. I don't. I literally just care about the music. And if the concept's a part of that music, fine. But I mean like all of this like hubbub that's around this, I don't care. It had no bearing on my opinion whatsoever. That said, I think I talked to August about this when we were filming the other night, when I described this to be the Great Gatsby of albums, where it's like, oh, all of these things are intentionally shallow, kind of unengaging, and supposed to represent a certain stiffness that maybe the common man is sort of like held at a distance from, because that's the point of the story. And the thing about The Great Gatsby is I don't like the point of the story, and I think it sucks, and I don't like reading it. And the problem with Daddy's Home is that I think it sucks, and I don't like listening to it. Pay Your Way in Pain, as we've already mentioned, I think is a terrible start to the album, because I like just everything about this song annoys the shit out of me. Like, no, it's not the most long song in the world, and it doesn't exactly like, it doesn't do anything egregious, but it's just like these vocal deliveries, the production, I couldn't wait for it to be over. And in many respects, it decided to do something different, is that I was just like, this is going to be so fucking annoying. And then largely it wasn't, it was just boring. The only thing I could come back to on this was Lana Del Rey, another artist who,
yes,
frankly,
I had a mention of her as well at some point.
I felt her too.
I don't particularly care for Lana Del Rey either, even though everyone like is like either has been a fan of her for forever or just like absolutely pisses their jeans over Norman fucking Rockwell, which again is another album that just whoosh, I don't fucking get it. It's better than this, but like it's just this whole light, airy, older pastiche kind of cheeky attitude, and it's like fucking, it's like rat poison to me. I just like I hate it immediately. And
all I'll say to the Lana Del Rey thing is that I agree that there's certain aspects. There's one specific song that reminds me of her in a certain way, and it's not that it sounds like her, but it's that it has a similar kind of subject matter to Lana Del Rey, and that's the song The Melting of the Sun, which I think is one of the better songs on the record. It's a tribute to classic female artists and the legacy that they built for women in music, and in many ways this reflecting on these kind of classic female artists, referring to them by their first name and having these kind of witty lines about their impact, felt very Lana Del Rey to me. But I think what separates the two, and why I personally like this record more than any Lana Del Rey record that I've heard, is that St. Vincent, for starters, this record, it definitely has some boring moments, but I don't think it meanders in the way that basically every Lana Del Rey record does incessantly. But also, Annie is not afraid to get really fucking weird and just collides these 70s sounds that in ways that are just really kind of like jarring. And yes, that results in some bad music on this record, I won't deny, but it's trying something, you know what I mean? It's taking a risk at least, and it's being kind of bold, and I respect that even when it fails, personally.
It's a classic case of bad ideas versus no ideas, and whether or not what works and what doesn't for you. And that's an entirely fair take. I'd say that even though I don't care for this album at all, it's just like the only reason that track bothers me, which is actually like The Melting of the Sun, I think is a fine track. Like it's just fine. I don't dislike it at all. That sort of that cheekiness of just the reverence and revering, and that sort of proximity to Lana Del Rey and just that attitude is still something that, like, I mean, I get it, but also I don't particularly like it. But I get it, I understand. I will say my favorite song, I have there are 2 songs on here that I think are just pretty good. This is the high points of the record for me, and that being Down and Out Downtown. I like it. I think it's a decent song. I don't really think it's the most like like every song on here to some extent. It's a little bit nondescript, but that said, I just think that there's a general pleasantness to the production here, and she just kind of lays off the whole, risking of playing with these sounds in a weird way to like let me actually fucking sit back and enjoy a song for one instance. I don't really find it super compelling lyrically, which is really just sort of my thesis for the album. And I think Somebody Like Me, one of the sort of like final 4 tracks, I like that song. Okay. I think it's decent. That said, Nelly, I think where I'll have to agree to disagree on is this whole like, she's really going whole hog on this whole 70s thing. And it's just like, that might be true to an extent, but I also think she's putting her feet in the water into the least possible version of this particular sound. And it's like, I appreciate it, but also you are doing this in such a cheap, tacky, plasticky way. And that's the key word of this album, is that it's fucking tacky. Listening, like, even, like, I don't like to have my opinion of art colored completely by like entirely aesthetic choices. Like, if the album cover has nothing to do with the music itself, that's fine. I don't give a shit. But I see this album cover and I'm just instantly like, oh, here we go. Fuck me. And God, I'll be damned if the songwriting and the actual sound of the album doesn't look and feel exactly like the album, where it's just like this fucking fake ass Tarantino font in the top right, and it's got like this fucking Instagram sepia filter on top of it, and she's dressed like she's fucking like she's a character who's ironically named something like Candy, and oh good golly, Candy Darling, that's a bad song.
It's a weak part of the record, but it is worth mentioning as well that it's meaningful, I guess, for its sentiment, which is a tribute. It carries on the Lana Del Rey thing. It's a tribute to the legendary actress Candy Darling, who was trans, and was a big star in Andy Warhol movies and stuff. And I think it's an interesting kind of note for the record to end on. It's kind of like fully embracing, I guess, the obsession with and the pastiche of this kind of like 60s, 70s era. I like the idea of the sentiment in the song, which is, Queen of South Queens, we never did stop cheering for you, and your wig blonde rolls home, waving from the latest uptown train. I think it's quite a beautiful sentiment to end the record on. But yeah, it also highlights one of the weakest aspects of the record, which is that it feels like, it's about sentiment, but not really musicality in this instance, because it's just a plodding end to the record musically as well. It just never really ignites, and it's a real shame, I think. But I like the sentiment of that song, and I wanted to shout it out as well, because I wasn't sure if that particular reference would get appreciated.
I had no clue, and it's a shame because I appreciate the sentiment too. I just wish the music behind it was frankly better. I mean, like, I don't really have too much more to say or anything. It's just that, like, I don't know. I think that this just finally crosses a sort of line, like, take my opinion for what it's worth, because I'm not the biggest St. Vincent enjoyer on planet Earth, even though I think Actor is like quite good. I think that Strange Mercy's quite good. It's just that, like, I am surrounded.
The Chad St. Vincent enjoyer.
Yeah, I had the same. I could tell by your facial expression you were thinking the same thing.
I'm surrounded by people who like not only like St. Vincent, but like are just fully in the tank for her. And I'm just like, this is just one of those things that I'm just like, I don't really think I get it. Like, even on the records that I like, I'm just like, this just doesn't hit anything for me, really, That's
fair enough. You know what's funniest about this whole thing to me is that when I got into St. Vincent, when the self-titled came out in 2014, she was just this indie rock god person who like was adored by indie rock fans. Most of her audience at her shows was like men in their 30s and 40s, basically. And now she's this, like, she has stans, and and she has like teenagers who are obsessed with her music, which is so funny to me.
Stage,
the venom which you said, the venom with which you said stands is hilarious. I just want to point that out.
I was listening to the most recent IndieCast episode. the other day, because of course I was, and they were talking about the fact that Pitchfork posted a positive review of this album. They gave it a 6.7, the lowest rating they've given her. And they were like, the writer was getting death threats, like literal death threats from
Jesus.
Stans. Like
That
they were.
I hope I get death threats. Fucking come at me.
I know.
That
And
makes
this
Like
me
is,
have a
seriously,
headache.
this is the album you're losing your shit over? Get a grip, man. Like what the fuck?
yeah, it's
Like
ridiculous.
I know it's got like hype and it's like all of these people are attached to her and everything, and like at the end of the day the thing about this album is that it's just like, yeah, it's annoying. I think it's tacky. I think the songwriting, generally speaking, kind of sucks just because it's evoking that whole Lana Del Rey like witty, irreverent, but also cheeky and like and I hate that fucking attitude. I want to smack that attitude in the face.
The thing that's weird about it though is that it's like that Lana Del Rey attitude on certain moments, but it's just like so unfriendly musically. Like I don't understand. I mean, I guess Mass Seduction is a pretty pop sheen record. I could see how she would get, young fans from that album, but this doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me either. Nothing on this album would be commercially successful. It's just not engineered that way. Maybe Down, I don't know, but like. It's so weird to me that Stans would gravitate to this thing that's so heavily embroidered in this era that they,
It's
I'm
because-
stereotyping, but they would know nothing about. Like the influences on this record, like Funkadelic and Steely Dan and all that sort of stuff. Teenage girls aren't into that, are they? Oh, fuck, I don't know.
No.
It's because literally none of that matters. It's just all
It's
all an
all
attraction to the artifice of this.
Yeah, and also the cult of
yeah.
personality, I guess, that I was talking about earlier with her, where
mean,
she's
it's
so
so much-
focused on her as an image.
There's so much of the problem with like online culture where it's like it's not about being right or having a point. It's about like loyalty to an idea, and the idea is St Vincent is good. St Vincent is good. We like St Vincent, it does my head in when people get this way about positive reviews, whether you're a stan or not. They like the damn thing.
I suspect we'll get to
Snyder.
elaborate. I suspect we'll get to elaborate on this topic heavily next week when we review new albums from 21 Pilots and Olivia Rodrigo.
Oh
Yes, we will.
God.
God.
Just to close out my thoughts here is that it's just like this album is just bewildering to me because it's like you have fucking Fantano giving this album like a 9 or something, and then like tons of people like it, and I'm just like, can like even with something where I was just like literally baffled as to why everyone loved it as much as they did, and just literally I couldn't access the part of my brain that lets me understand it, like What's Your Pleasure, for example, where it's still just like, I don't really get this at all, and I don't even really think I get why other people don't agree with me on here, or this isn't just like a general more opinion that's being voiced more, is that this baffles me so much more, is that because I don't even like hate it, it's just so nondescript that it just sort of exists, and I'm just like, this is the thing, huh? Like this is the thing everybody's going nuts right now over? This is the
really
zeitgeist?
just like difficult to imagine having feelings on it.
Well,
It would
this
be
is
like
where-
if people fucking
Alright.
got after like that Kyle Kraft album that I like. It would be like if people lost their shit over that. And it's like, again, I love that album. Why? What in the fuck?
This is where I'll vary. This is where I'll vary here, because I agree that it's surprising, as I've said, that people are getting into this. But I'd much rather people be obsessed with something like this than half of the shit. And not to sound like a fucking boomer here, but half of the nondescript shit where there's just no way of fucking differentiating it from anything else. I at least respect the fact that this thing, and again, I've basically already said this, but it's deliberately weird and wacko and fucked and just strange. And I like that.
I appreciate that too, and I don't like it. I like I completely agree with you. If this was just a fucking like, at least this is what I expect the Olivia Rodrigo album is going to be, because everybody's losing their minds about it, and everything I've seen from it just makes me think that like, I'm not obviously deciding my opinions on an album beforehand, but it's just like this album feels like this was genetically engineered in a lab somewhere to be able to spread like a virus. And it's like, I don't give a shit about that kind of stuff. Keep it away from me. This, on the other hand, is like, it's got a vision. It's got a voice behind it. I just hate the vision, and I think the voice is fucking annoying.
Look, at least, I mean, we're having a more animated discussion than we had when we talked about like Ice Age last week, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, that's all right. But
So if we get
there's-
an animated discussion out of it, I'm all for it. I've already talked about all the songs I like on this record anyway. There's a lot that I don't like. I just want to take
The
a
Laughing
second.
Man.
The Laughing Man is the most boring song on this record by far.
Yeah.
Song on this record.
Anyway, it is like, again, I think there's even the most boring songs on this record have like it has a nice subject matter. It's a touching ode to a childhood friend that passed away.
Yeah.
It just never lifts off musically. It swirls around rather than like orienting those swirling sounds into something. And I feel similarly, I know Jake kind of gave a half of the defense to the song. I feel similarly about somebody like Me as well, which has a really nice lyrical idea, which is deliberately choosing to approach love and marriage as a delusion that you kind of mutually agree to participate in, and then finding beauty in that. And the song has some absolutely gorgeous sounds in it, but it's so musically slight as well. It never really lifts off. And the one more song I want to talk about before I'll stop is what I think is the most, maybe not the worst, but I think the most fundamentally mistaken song on this record that I think encapsulates everything that is a real shame about it. And that's the song My Baby Wants a Baby.
There it is. There it is.
Which I think is the most unpleasant song to listen to on the record, and the most misguided as well. And it also, alongside Pay Your Way in Pain, it also puts front and center Annie's vocal limitations. And look, I respect the shit out of her trying to really put some stank on shit in their new way, in this really funky soul influenced way, but she just hits a brick wall with her vocal ability here. She slurs and trips through lines in the song. I think it's meant to be like endearingly shaggy, and call back to the kind of crooning style of her 60s and 70s heroes, but her vocal tone, just the way her voice sounds, is not made for this kind of singing. The band behind her, I think, do bring some heft to the song, so it's not all bad, I suppose, but god damn, it's just like annoying every time she opens her mouth on this
Less
song.
stank and more stink.
So that's, it's like, my whole feeling in one sentence about this record is I applaud Annie for taking on the sound of this record with such commitment as well. Like I'll echo what I said at the very start. I think she commits like hell to the bit here, much more than most other artists would have. And my temperament, I guess, is just that I respect that more than just half baking it. And I guess maybe some of you might think that it is half baked, but so I applaud that. And I do applaud that Annie is like revealing her own weaknesses as a performer, whether intentionally or not. But it just doesn't redeem the record enough for it to stand up with her best stuff, especially when you have a particular expectation, for me anyway, from a St Vincent record in terms of quality. And it's, I don't know. I just don't know how this record could be improved. Like specifically how it could be improved. Specifically how she could have improved it rather than just being better. You know what I mean?
I think she could have probably improved it by. I think it could be seriously improved by committing it more to being like a proper fictional character concept album that happens to be inspired by real life events. Because that's when the record's like best to me, is when it feels really narrative.
Yeah, I think she's trying to do that. I think it just comes back down to how ill-fitted the particular combination of sounds and pastiches that she's using there is to her. It's just it just doesn't click into place with her the way that it would with a different artist. I think, I don't know, it's just not a good fit for her, basically.
I could just say what I was gonna say about this album before we close. Keep it very brief. Hashtag gaslight.
Oh, fuck me.
4 out of 10.
Well, I'm putting that on the docket.
Spitting.
Yeah, that's Morgan rating it. You better not fucking ask him to give his rating again.
Fucking crossed arms. Hell
he'll just drop it another point out of pure spite.
Yep.
And you know what? I would be like, fucking fair enough.
Yeah,
Punish Andy
motherfucker.
Clark for your all's transgressions.
Oh man.
Have
Okay.
you considered this, Annie Clark? Sends Lana Del Rey's discography.
I stand by the
Because
fact
at least-
that this is better than any Lana Del Rey album.
Jake, what are you?
You're probably right. I mean,
I simply,
Here we go.
I will not be checking.
At least
I will simply
at
not be
least there
listening.
at least there are songs on this record with a fucking pulse.
Look, there's a
favorite
reason
song.
we didn't review Chemtrails over the fucking country club, and there's a reason we're not going to
That's
be
what it
reviewing.
was called.
There's a reason we're not going to be reviewing Blue Banisters, which I bet all four of you forgot was even a thing.
No, I
can't
remember.
forget
I
it because
hadn't,
Cole keeps
unfortunately.
Forgetting
There's like
implies
5
that it was there to begin with.
You know
I
what it
can't
is
forget.
as well. You know why we're definitely not going to talk about it, even though this would probably be the only reason to talk about it. But we're definitely not going to do it because it's Lana Del Rey. Is that this is apparently Blue Banisters apparently is the album where she takes on her critics.
Oh my god.
That's worked so well for pop
Lana
stars
Del
before.
Rey's
Reputation.
Kamikaze.
Critics is- You know what the funniest thing about Kamikaze is? A fucking tangent, I know, but just real quick, is that is an album
ahead.
where Eminem both admits that he fucked up with Revival and says, actually, Revival was good and the critics didn't get it. At the same fucking record.
Audiences want a burger, and Revival is a porterhouse.
Like, what's the line where he's like, I need the I don't hate trap, I just need the old M that would like spit back in my critics.
Yeah, that's on Kamikaze.
And then
as
he's
well.
like, but actually the album was good.
Like,
M.
An
he
album-
opens the album, like screwing up the paper and going, oh, fuck this shit. And like,
Yeah.
it's the funniest.
An album so boring, we have elected to trudge through the crate and talk about Eminem.
Sorry.
Jake, what are
favorite
your
tracks and ratings.
Ratings.
Jake.
Oh Christ, my 3 favorite fucking tracks are Down and Out, Downtown, Somebody Like Me, and The Melting of the Sun, I guess. My least favorite song is a three-way tie between Pay Your Way and Pain, Candy Darling, and At the Holiday Party. Or not At the Holiday Party, My Baby Wants a Baby. And at 4.5 out of 10.
You know,
Augustus.
this is the time where this applies. I didn't use it last week. Got to use this week. This song, my favorite track is Chinese Satellite. My least favorite is Chinese Satellite. 4.5 out of 10. Move on.
Be raking in them numbers.
I don't need
So moving right-
to run the numbers.
my 3 favorite tracks on this album are Down by Blink 182, Down by 311,
Yeah.
Down with the Six. And my least favorite track is Down Under by Men at Work.
Down by
I got
311.
from a land
4 out
down
of 10.
under. It's about smoking weed in Australia.
Yeah.
My favorite
Saoirse.
tracks are Daddy's Home, and I'm very sorry. Pay Your Way in Pain. My least favorite track is The Laughing Man for the Casavetes
Yeah.
2 lines.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I
I knew
forgot
that would
about
get you.
that.
Yeah. Well, it's actually kind of unintentionally hilarious, that line as well. It's like,
It
like
is.
Cassavetes, I'm under the influence or something. It's like really
Yeah.
fucking funny.
No, it's not
I
under the
listened to
influence.
that-
It's fucking party. It's opening night. Is that what she says?
I'm sure
No,
it was
it is under the influence. It is.
Oh,
under
maybe
the
it was.
influence.
I don't know.
Hang on, I'm going to get the
Like
exact
Cassavetes.
bar.
No, she says like Casavetes.
The exact
heroin, so
rap
much of the influence
verse.
daily.
The exact
Spitting bar. I heard that and was like, Saoirse's going to mention this in some respect.
No,
and I'm
listen,
glad you came in for me at the very
listen,
end.
hang on, wait a second. Listen,
Okay,
I'm going
okay,
to
go,
read,
go,
this,
go,
I'm
go,
gonna
go,
read
go,
this
go,
whole
go.
verse, and it's fucking
Stanza.
hilarious. It's hilarious. Brown liquor, why? Not sure. Like the heroines of Cassavetes, I'm underneath the influence daily. All grass stains and chicken dinners, menthol mouths and secret stitches, half pipes and PlayStations, suicidal ideation.
Suicidal ideation was me during that fucking song.
Wow.
Half
That is-
pipes and
the reason-
PlayStations, suicidal ideation has got to be like a fucking
That
A
is
Logic
Linkin
bar.
Park bar.
Yeah, that is like 2 steps away from being a Rivers Cuomo lyric. It needs to be pervier, but like otherwise it's
Something about an Asian girl playing PlayStation.
Yeah. Anyway, we're dragging this fucking segment out. So should you
Yeah,
give it a
but
rating?
the reason that couplet annoyed me so much is that it was like, is this like what people feel like when I make stupid puns? Because I feel like it is.
Yes, that's exactly what it feels like.
I mean it speaks for itself.
Anyway,
Yeah. Anyway, I give this record a 6. Let's move on.
You just fucking said it.
Me. My 3 favorite tracks are Down, Down and Out, Downtown, and what's a fucking I mean there are fucking R songs I like on this record. What's another one? At the Holiday Party. Least favorite is probably The Laughing Man, although My Baby Wants a Baby is a worse song. But it just fails in interesting ways, I guess, which you're probably sick of fucking hearing me saying. I'm giving this album a 6.5.
Nice. So that's somehow a positive score. That's a 5.1.
I mean,
On
come on,
average.
is it really?
By a literal decimal point.
And then, do
another
you wanna know the
album
only
Tyler gave
album-
it. Another album that Tyler gave a 6.1 is the 1975's Notes on a Conditional Form.
which
like-
is a better album than this.
Do you want to know the only other album with a 5.1
I
average?
guess.
Captain Beefheart's Magic Trout Mars
Oh,
Replica.
no.
Can we
August
move
is-
on to the good album before
trying
Morgan
not to
literally
vomit.
fucking kills himself on air?
Yes. Hey,
All
good
right.
content. We've made some good content today already.
Make better content by talking about something good.
All right, August, it is
Christ.
time for you to fucking leave.
Yeah, check this out. Magic.
Make like a
Okay, now that you may have noticed, August has departed, and now it is time to talk about the album that he made with his creative partner Masen as Glacier Flower. So this obviously is a review that has been a long time coming. It's an album. I mean, in terms of actual album cycles, it hasn't been a long time coming. It's literally been less than a year since the last one. But if you read my interview with August and Masen, you'll know that the creative process of creating this record was very long-winded. I think a word that would be appropriate to describe it is torturous. They began work on this record. In fact, some of the music that you hear on this record, I believe, existed before the last record was even released. But the bulk of it has come from the time since then. And I think even a good chunk of it in recent months even. But I think it's also meaningful to lead off by saying that this is a record that August and Masen deliberately chose to release on the day that high school ended, for I presume both of them. I know August at least. And so in many ways, it's a bittersweet album that it's a celebration of endings. We're already off to a great start. But no, I think the significance of that release is worth dwelling on, I guess, because in many ways, this feels like both the arrival of Glacier Flower's fully realized sound in a really big way, and also kind of like a bittersweet ending as well, because I know August and Masen have also talked about wanting to step away from music for at least a little while, especially having created what they see justifiably as their best and most impressive work yet, which, you know, no surprises here, I agree with and feel intensely passionate about. Yeah.
Something that's worth noting, I think, is that we reviewed August's last album, Glacier Flower 20, on this very podcast. We talked about it. You can go and check that out if you want to look at that a little bit.
3 of us did.
3 of us did. But I think we can all, like, the general consensus was that that was their second album, that it was an improvement on the first album, which was already very good, but was very clearly an amateur effort from people who were still finding their voice and discovering their influences. And Glacier Flower 20 felt like, it felt like a bit of an arrival in the sense that it's like everything was more fine-tuned, everything sounded better. It was just an overall improvement in terms of both ambition and execution. So this was like a really anticipated release, like, divorced from the fact that obviously all of us are friends of August, and to an extent we all have a connection to him. But I think it's also just sort of worth noting here that, like, August's production and talking about, like, music happened very external to the 4 of us. It was like we would get, like, if he released a single, but, like, it's not like he talked to us when he finished a song or even talked to us about his creative process. He did this completely independently of us. Yeah. So I want to make it very evidently clear, for many reasons, that this is not an instance of, like, bias, because August is our friend. And I just want to say that out of the gate, because, like, I feel like that is A, important, and B, you should take what we have to say seriously here, because I feel like you would be selling us short as critics, and you'll also be selling the artistry, the work itself that went into the album, a bit short as well.
If you think we're just hype men for August in this moment, you can feel free to kiss the whitest part of my lily white hairy ass.
I mean,
I just also just
watch something else.
I just want to get in very quickly. You can go in a minute, but, like, going into this review, I remembered how deeply honored I was when, I don't want to talk about it too much, but, like, when something I made was reviewed, you guys gave really honest criticisms that were valid and good, and I wanted to keep that mindset.
We don't just kiss ass. Is what we're saying. Look,
yeah, I definitely think that we shouldn't approach this with the mindset that people are expecting us to do that. I think we definitely should. The people who listen to us probably listen to us because they respect the fact that we're bluntly honest about stuff. But I want to add, just on the note of context before we get into this record, just integrating something that was said in the interview that I did with Masen. Pointed out that with the first Glacier Flower record, the approach was really just finding shit that sounded nice, like synths and stuff that sounded nice, and if they sounded good, just chucking them on a track and not really thinking about composition as much. And that was also something that they tried to move beyond with the second record they put out as well. But August and Masen will be the first to tell you, didn't completely, it wasn't, the second record wasn't completely made in that more purposeful way. Like the last track, Grand Journey Across the Synth Landscape, was something that was made early that was more of a vestige of that, trying to find really good synth stuff and thinking less about composition. Not that that song isn't compositionally good, but I think it's fair to say that this is the record that really fully, completely has entire compositional and conceptual assuredness, and sees them both working in a very focused and purposeful way with every single piece here, and the synths that they use and the tones that they create and the atmospheres they try to conjure. There is nothing here that feels incidental in the way that some moments of both of those previous 2 records, as good as they are, did feel. And I think that the fact that I adore this album as much as I do has made it easier to be bluntly honest about the fact that I think that it is by far and away the best thing that they've made. And I genuinely, as much faith as I had in August and Masen as musicians, their last record for one was immaculately produced and sounded great. I fully was not expecting just how much sonic and compositional depth this record would have. This is a record that, for lack of a better word, sounds professional. I've listened to this record on FLAC and WAVE and lossless files with high-end headphones, and you could not tell this was made by 2 young people kidding around with whatever they could get their hands on. This is a record that has an incredible amount of sonic depth to it. And it is entrancing, and it is captivating, and it is at points just frankly bewildering in how good it is.
Something I think is worth highlighting is I bought the pair of headphones I'm currently wearing yesterday. And it wasn't until listening to them on these, which are much better than my old ones, like I really liked it, but listening to it on this amazing pair of headphones was like, wow, the depth of the sonic palette is extraordinary on this record. And it really also highlighted how much more thought towards conjuring a specific tone has gone onto this record. Like, this is something I said to August in our DMs the first time I listened to this record, which is the first two records were exciting in the way of like a really fresh band with a fresh voice make a collection of songs that really invigorate you to listen to more of the band. This is the first record where I'm like, this is a really exciting album that I'm like really excited about as a singular piece separated from the band.
Yeah.
Like if the other two are exciting to get me hyped about the artist, this is the album where I am excited about the album, you know?
Sure. So with ambient and drone music, it can be difficult to kind of really like talk about the album, and we could get very vague about it. My suggestion was, and I don't know if any of you had a different approach you wanted to do, that maybe for this we should sort of talk about each track individually, maybe go through
really
the record
to do that
piece by piece,
because
because
I'm really happy to do
Yeah.
that because a lot of my thoughts are specific to tracks.
Yeah.
And what I meant about the fact that it's really obvious how much more thought has gone into conjuring a tone are down to the fact that each track is so excellent at being specific in that respect.
Yeah. So as we kind of leap into this record then song by song, one thing I will say, I will give off, because this is something we can reflect on, I guess, as the album goes on, is the very short statement that August and Masen provided on the Bandcamp page as the sole piece of context for this record, which is that, and I'll read it directly. Following the events that occurred in 2020, the coronavirus pandemic, quarantine, Black Lives Matter movements, death, and more, Glacier Flower sought to capture the feelings and moods many people experienced. This album is as lonely as it is massive, disheartening as it is calming, crude as it is beautiful. Which, you know, is, I believe Masen wrote that, and Jesus Christ, if you want to, you guys don't even need to get a publicist. That's as good a press release,
for real.
as good a press release as I've read for an album that's come out this year. So the record, I think, especially when you consider the color and the lightness and the depth and the I guess variety of the sounds on individual tracks on the last record, I think the record starts off in quite a confronting way with Beyond the Postcard Beaches, which is honestly one of the most impressive pieces of music I've heard this year. I remember putting this on the first time when August sent me an advance copy so I could have heard the record before I interviewed them. And the moment this track started with that kind of synth that just kind of blares and throws you into it, it's immediately captivating. You're immediately feeling like you are being immersed in a completely different world, regardless of what the context is of where you're listening to it. The first time I heard it, I was sitting at work, and then listening to it later in the evening in the darkness was a completely different experience. But in both instances, you're thrown into the world of this record. You're completely enveloped in it. The heft and the weight of the droning on this track is immense. With good headphones, it feels practically oppressive. There's beneath that general drone, there's this sound that I can only describe as a monster breathing. It also sounds like gas flowing out of a cylinder as well. I have no idea how they created that. I can't even do it. I can't even approximate it with that sound musically. I'd love to know.
It is simply not a human noise.
No, definitely not. And then you have the central element of this song, which is this kind of looped, cascading melodic fragment that sort of pushes outward and almost sort of like melts into the mix of the track when it kind of gets all reverby towards the end of each iteration. And then that moment, there's like a harmonic wave that gently pokes through, and it's like a sliver of the moon peeking through the clouds. So fucking amazing detail.
It's such a fantastic way to start the album, because at least for me, it's like you have the title Beyond the Postcard Beaches with and with the context of the album given, it's just like, this to me is just the sound of like it that repetition really works for you, or at least works for me, just sort of getting you embroiled in these soundscapes, because like once you're like halfway through this song, you're just fucking in it, you're locked in. I could never like just listen to that song and not listen to the rest of the album. But like it locks you into place with this sort of like slow moving rhythm, and combined with the title, to me it feels like reaching out. It feels like you're trying to physically like transcend into something else, that sort of yearning to be at a different place, and the idea of the like beyond the postcard beaches, like staring at a place that looks ideal and picturesque and beautiful, and wanting to go beyond where you are and even beyond that, and to like feel that sort of thing. And it's just like this, it's so beautifully immersive, and it feels like, I don't know, I've been listening to a lot of ambient and electronic music, especially like in the last few weeks, which I want to say first off the bat is an honest to God thank you to August and Masen, because this album prompted me getting into the genre of ambient music. Honestly, like it's stuff that I've listened to before, but like I'd never attempted to gone after the canon stuff, and this made me want to, because I like it so much. I think that this is such a purposeful flow that like a lot of electronic albums, they sort of have this, you know, structure on a very micro level, on progressions within the songs, and the albums, which this isn't inherently a bad thing, but the albums themselves feel like a collection of songs, and the flow is more or less, just because they are ambient tracks, they can just kind of flow together easily, whereas this feels so meticulous and so purposeful and is so good at its job, and it makes me like just it's euphoric, and it's dark, and I like it's just a perfect way to go into an album, I think.
Yeah, the way I would put it is, well, there's a couple things about this song in particular. What it reminds me of is, to me, it feels like the more spacious parts of last year's Sign by Autechre, and the more, but sort of performed with the textures of Triripite, or even
I was going to say,
one.
yeah, Amber.
Jesus.
Amber.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, even the really gentle moments on Amber, it reminds me of.
Me too.
And you know, that's a 9 and a 10 and a 10 there. So yeah, it's the other way that I would put this is that this, I turned the album on, heard this song, and about halfway through I went, this is their best song, and it is not top 3 on the album.
Yeah,
correct. I completely agree.
Yeah, I had a 3-track stretch where I was like, okay, these are the 3 best songs I've ever made, and then they're not. This one isn't included in them.
It's like there is a conscious, active, like it's like they are literally trying to top themselves constantly. That's the hunger you get here.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's interesting that you talk about Autechre, because and I'm just going to say you all have covered my thoughts wonderfully so far. I have plenty of thoughts on the next one, but for me, listening to this track, my overriding thought, the whole album really, my overriding thought was, wow, it's really interesting that I know August loves Music Has a Right to Children, because this album feels like the evil stepchild of that album.
The evil stepchild of that album is the album that follows it, Geogetty, which I know August loves almost as much as that album.
Ooh.
And you give it a 9. So there's lots of stuff on Geogetty that this, if we're talking about Boards of Canada references, those 2 records directly, and even some of their later stuff, which is more ambient and less beat focused, you can totally hear that there's passion for that music and this. There are 2 specific references I want to bring up that this track reminded me of, one of which I know August has heard and one of which I know August hasn't heard. The one that he hasn't heard is a real deep cut Autechre track that's not on any of their albums, called Purlent's Subrange 636, which is very similar in sound to this, and very sparse and floating through space and stuff, and I adore it. And the other track, which Jake might even be able to connect with me on because I think he will have heard it earlier today, is the opening track on Ambient 4 called Lizard Point by Brian Eno.
Yes.
Which is
that album in general, very similar.
Which is, for the record, Lizard Point is my favorite dark ambient piece of all time. And this track reminds me of it heavily. It's just the thing that's similar about the two is that there's immediately, you can't explain why, but as soon as it starts, there's immediately a sense of place in it. Like you feel like you're in an environment that Eno, and in this case Glacier Flower, are specifically conjuring with the sounds in the track. You don't just feel like you're listening to interesting sounds, you feel like you're being put into a physical place with the music, which I think is the goal of a lot of ambient music.
For me, that place was the human fields in towards the beginning of The Matrix, where it's just and columns of the maybe the single bleakest humanistic image ever conjured in film.
Yeah, for me, it's like being like someone's cut the rope in space and you're just like floating through a fucking vacuum. Okay, so
to talk about the next track, Sylvia.
Silver. Not
Sylvia. Yeah. The next track. So the next track, Silver. The first time I think I heard this track out of context of the record, right?
Single.
This was the single that was dropped in January.
Exactly, and the vibe I got off of it was, wow, this is new for the band, and like I like it, but I feel like I like it more when it's in context of the record. And boy, did I! Oh boy, this is such an interesting textural song.
Yeah. So when Silver released, I believe that you can check the fucking YouTube comments because I definitely wrote this immediately. I was like, this is the best song you've made so far. And it was. And what's great about it, and I like that they chose this as a single as well, because to me, this is the track that feels the most related to their previous work, even though I agree with Saoirse that it also feels completely different, because for one, it's like huge and immense and the drone is heavy and it's a long piece, but in the same way, it also has a kind of like, I don't know how to describe it without sounding pretentious, but it's like kind of like a childlike naivety to it as well, that reminds me of some of that, the feeling of that I got from the early Glacier Flower stuff, particularly like some of the songs on 20. But again, it develops there, and that's kind of like an aspect of the song that is swamped in this other stuff that is new. It's a track that uses melodic fragments to great effect. This time it shimmers in counterpoint to a drone that is more active in its own melodic shift. So it's similar in structurally to the first track, but there's more, I guess, melodic development happening in this song. And you also have an interesting counterpoint that to me almost feels like a Glacier Flower staple at this point, which is the use of field recording in this track as well. Specifically what sounds like dragging footsteps, although it could really be anything that's creating it. Adds a really kind of tangible earthliness. Like you had the spacious drone vibe that's very kind of, spacious. That's it. Yeah. But you also have this dragging sound that's inescapably like grounding you on the surface of the planet, basically. And it's a really cool piece of counterpoint. The reference point I want to bring up for this track, and this is probably the strongest musical similarity on the whole record to something else that I love, is that the drone here is very Stars of the Lid.
Yes.
Specifically like Tired Sounds and Refinement of the Decline, those two like titans of ambient music. And I don't think August has even heard those. Maybe Masen has, and I don't make this comparison simply to Flatter because those are my favorite ambient records ever. The sonic similarities are very strong for me, whether intended or not. but also like they're imbued within this additional mixture of things that are distinctly August and Masen. And I think it makes sense that August and Masen did say in the interview that I did with them that a number of tracks on this record were done individually by one or the other and then kind of sent for feedback. But Silver was one of two that they worked on early and collaboratively. And I think maybe that's the sense in which it reminds me the most of their earlier stuff, despite the fact that this record was in large part made in a very kind of separated way between the two of them. So yeah, it feels like they're taking aspects of the feel of that 20 record and they're imbuing it in this new oppressive darker landscape to bridge that gap. And so it's just gorgeous, and I adore this song.
That is something that really surprised me about your interview when they said so many of these tracks were written in isolation, because they feel so of a piece.
Yeah.
Like there isn't one track that feels like it's not of the same creative vision as another.
Yeah, well, I think what that's reflective of is the fact that August and Masen, despite the fact that they were working separately, were very much kind of in the same sort of state of mind with the creation of this record. And there was, I guess you could project a kind of spiritual connection even, or like just like a friendship connection, considering they've known each other all their lives, as they told me as well, that they kind of knew like what Glacier Flower is something that they both just instinctively, intuitively knew, and were able to imbue into the pieces that they recorded, and as a result produce something that is this unified. But Silver is, I think, a highlight for that clear collaborative feel that it has.
I think I would also like to shout out another thing here that like Saoirse said, that they feel very of piece, and like it's definitely because of like the whole, you know, they're definitely pointed in the same direction, but it's also just because I think the album is flawlessly sequenced. I love sort of the way that this sort of like you have that yearning of the first track of the reaching and the gesturing of like pushing outward, and this feels like the actual active taking of the journey. You have that field recording and that sort of those steps that are being taken, and that's sort of like it feels like you're following something. It feels like you're hearing or seeing something and you're trying to pursue it, and you're just sort of in this completely alien environment, and then it's sort of the like just sort of like those synths just kind of swallow you, and you get to that point where it just perfectly sets you up for a to go into the next song. And like I think it's a beautiful piece of sequencing. I think the music piece itself is great, and I love pretty much everything about it. And Silva's my least favorite track on here, to be perfectly honest, and I think this track is fucking exceptional. Like I think it would be worse if the album would be worse if it wasn't even on it. It's just the worst it's just my least favorite by merit of the fact that something has to be. But like it serves its function better than, like, I wouldn't do anything to change it, frankly.
Yeah. Morgan.
Yeah, I'm again sort of leaning on comparisons just because I don't really know a whole lot about how to talk about ambient music. But this record over and over again reminded me of my favorite electronic / ambient composer, that being Cliff Martinez. Silva in particular reminded me hugely of the score to Sexualizing Videotape, which is like relatively early on in Martinez's career, but is just as much of a statement of arrival as this song is to Martinez's score and the film itself for Soderbergh. Virtually a flawless piece of ambience. It's one of the tracks on the album that best signifies the press release blurb that they wrote. It feels distinctly emotional, and really everything on here does in some way, but this is more forlorn and sorrowful in a way, but it also does carry the the feeling of, I think, sort of youthfulness that Tyler was talking about, in the way that it constantly feels like it's searching for something, or searching
Curiosity.
for itself, even trying to find out what it is as it goes.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's like where I feel that in those repeated kind of melodic fragments that penetrate the song. It feels like something is reaching for something and not quite getting there, and it adds a real pathos to the track. And that sort of tragedy and sadness is all over this album in various ways. And like, again, with ambient music, it's very, you've got to, as Jake said, referring to the lyrics of the Twilight Sad in our C review, you got to be a little with it. But
I love that you remembered that.
but that's the thing with ambient music. Like, sometimes you can't just describe how something sounds. Sometimes you have to describe the image it gives you, or the emotional state it puts you in, and that's really it, I guess. Okay, so let's move on to the third track then. Tristitia ex nihil. It is an absolutely immense piece of music. This was one that really took me aback, in the same way that the opening track did the first time I heard it. It is probably one of the most, I guess, maybe directly emotional sounding ones, just for how urgent its shimmering, washing drone feels. I was reminded, again, another comp that I'm pretty sure no one in this podcast has heard, but Illuvium, the ambient artist Illuvium, is one of my favorite ambient artists. His record False Readings On, and also Nightmare Ending as well, two great ambient drone records. The very similar sound to this track, that kind of urgency to it. And it was really beautiful and spine chilling. But what's great about this track is it's not just that, how it has this kind of shimmering, kaleidoscopic sound, but it also is so magnificently deep in its soundscape as well. It's almost overwhelming. It feels like you're falling into it at certain points. There's a beautiful moment about 2.5 minutes in where the drone just deepens with this new wave that's added into it, and then another wave is layered on top of it to harmonize with it. It's enormous. It's stunning. There are moments towards the end of this track as well when that lower backing drone deepens and then almost like kind of melts into these different sort of tones at certain points that it sounds silly, but that took my breath away. I love the way that this piece starts simple but stretches and pulses throughout its runtime. It's one of many ways in which these longer tracks truly justify their length to really get you, I think.
Yeah, I think one of the things that stood out to me, just in terms of like production work about this track, is that sort of shimmering drone that you talked about. It sounds like, this is so esoteric, it borders on being completely meaningless, but just in like a prosaic sense, it's like a frozen scream, and it just brushes against and it kind of scrapes at you a little bit. It's kind of harsh, and it's kind of like, it's very icy and bitter and cold, and it feels like the transition, like the journey from the last track, has led you into a place that's just completely unfamiliar and alien, and seeing things that basically are so beyond your perception that they're almost like scraping at your senses in that sense. But it's like, it's not overtly a negative feeling. It's just that like every time that happens, that sort of wash, it's just this cycling thing, and it's fucking, I feel like Daniel Craig in Knives Out is just like makes no damn sense.
Yeah.
Me though. It's just, I love hearing that sound.
Perhaps part of that feeling as well is sort of suggested a little bit with the title of the track, which is Latin for the closest Latin translation I can get. Maybe August could clarify this, is sorrow out of nothing. And it's kind of like, yeah, there's a sense of kind of emptiness and isolation to it. This is, I think, also a point of the record where you start to lean really heavily into that feeling more and more. It's kind of, it gets in the next few tracks really quite emotionally overwhelming. And you do feel like you're isolated in a certain way.
Yeah, I just want to say, when I said there was a stretch of 3 tracks that were, I think, the 3 best tracks I've made, they are the 3 after this. But this sets you up so well for them, because it's not just that it's like long and sort of bleak and it repeats in a way that hooks you in and has that sort of hypnagogic thing that gets you hooked into what Glacier Flower does in their ambient music. It sounds immense, and it gets pretty huge sounding as it goes on. And it's not that it sounds like it was recorded in a big place, it's that it sounds like it was recorded in a big heart, you know. There's just so much feeling is wrung out of it. Like you just dipped this like rag in a bucket of emotion and you're wringing out every drop of it. Because it just sounds so heavily laden with I mean, yeah, sorry, I had nothing. It's such a wonderful title because it can be quite minimal, but it rings out such a like nihilistic sense of just like recognition of the bleak, and the fact that it conjures such a complex emotion as that realization of meaninglessness almost, or defeat, and in such a complicated way. That's such a testament to what you can do with instrumental music.
Baller.
Yeah, I think this is another moment where the sequencing of the album is particularly genius, because I have I think if I was making this album, I would have just made Silva and Tristitia Ex Nihilo one track. They feel so of 2 halves to me. And that one is almost part 2 to the other. And it's similarly brilliant to Silva. In fact, I prefer this one simply because I find it more challenging and beguiling almost, because my instinct with the really sharp icy drone is that it sounds like a fork scraping across a plate, and I don't like it, but I really also do. It fascinates me to no end, the
One
sound design on that part in particular.
one thing it reminded me of, very vaguely, and this I think August will appreciate, is the part at the very end of the album Lift Your Skinny Fists by Godspeed Your Black Emperor, where you just have these kind of like trilling guitars that have been treated. I don't even know if they're guitars or they're strings that have been treated at the very final minute of that record that sound like triumphant and sad, and they have a very similar timbre quality to those sounds on this track. And I do wonder if that was intentional or not, because I know August likes that record. Anyway,
Just this record don't stop.
it really do not.
And speaking of not stopping,
Yes,
the next
so
track is a good reason for everything to fall apart.
this is, I think, an interesting point on the album where, because to me, and I guess we could debate this, there's a beauty and even a sort of hopefulness to that last track that I think is contrasted in an interesting way with this piece. And I also like, this is the point in the record where I think the record really gets properly dark, like really leans into that darkness. And and I think that's complemented by the fact that the track titles get more bluntly dark, like a good reason for everything to fall apart. It has like these overlapping piano loops. And the one thing I want to say about it, and this is going to piss August off probably, is that these overlapping piano loops, the one thing they reminded me of, funnily enough, was Videotaped by Radiohead.
Shit, that's such a good comp though.
Which
what?
I know he hasn't
If-
heard. And
If he wants to get mad at that, just know that he literally just compared you to one of the greatest songs of all time. So
Yeah.
shut up.
It's like, it's not just that it has overlapping piano loops, but there's like a syncopation in them.
Yeah.
That is very, like, obviously Videotape is like, that is syncopation, the song. And
Yep.
and that just comparison just hit me doing notes on this morning. And yeah, beautiful song. I'll shut up.
I love this fucking song. Like this is I already loved Tristitia ex nihilo. I'm not even gonna, but like I love that song. I think it's virtually fucking perfect. But like in terms of the emotional timbre of the album, when I think of what it feels like broadly, I really do think of this one. That sort of looping piano, and it's sort of like there's like that drone and that like really, really, really low drone that just sort of like peeks its way through. Like this is such an immaculately structured song, so that like and it'll be different ones too. They're different in very subtle ways. It'll just sort of continue along for a passage, and then something else will sort of appear, and then that sort of takes the through line of the song, and then just sort of keeps moving. And it's these really subtle progressions with these really, really subtle differences, and that lead piano melody sort of keeps everything going and locked in, so that it doesn't feel like, you know, the mood is not contrasted by what they're doing. And it's just so tangibly sad and heartbreaking. Like I just listened to this, and it's just like it perfectly would score itself to like a really dour moment of isolation, like a film or something. It's just so lonely sounding.
Yeah.
And it really reminded me of Harold Budd when I was listening to his stuff, specifically with the Pearl last night. And I was just like, holy shit, this sounds like those tend to have like a deeper soundscape, and this is a lot more intimate. But I prefer this approach here for this album, just because the intimacy really, really fucking sells it here, just because Tristitia was such a track that was so like at least abrasive, like for this album and what it's doing. It's so confrontational and so like heavy in a way, and this sort of contrasting with that afterwards is just like a beautiful zeroing in of what they're trying to do. And I fucking love that piece of sequencing. It's fantastic. I love this song.
Yeah,
Glad you mentioned like a particularly lonely moment of a film, because yet again, I am once again bringing up Cliff Martinez, because it reminded me of his score to Solaris,
Yeah.
Soderbergh's
Yes.
Solaris, which,
Yeah.
as I said
Well,
as much
several-
I said as much in the chat the other day, is my favorite film score of all time, and just one of my favorite albums in general. And it's like the fact that I don't find the gap in quality that wide at all between this and really any given piece on that score is astounding, because these kids are 18, and fuck them. I'm mad.
Yeah, no, several points across the whole album reminded me not of the soundtrack, but Cliff Martinez's original score work for Nick Graffin's Drive, actually.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite albums since forever. But no, this is such an appropriate title. And the thing is, it feels of a piece with this like triplet that I've highlighted, because they're all sort of about loneliness in one way or another. Where like, and we'll get into the different nuances of that as we go on. But this feels like right at the end of the wiping of the memory in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, where he's just accepting that this beautiful thing is lost. And it is just like, what really hooked me from the beginning is that, yeah, the piano loop is distorted and sort of dissonant and atonal. And it loops in that way. And it just, and the way it brings in layers and layers of like airy ambience, it just makes you feel so deeply alone.
I'm glad
Sorry.
I liked you brought up the dissonance of it as well. That's a big part of the effect of that sound and that track. Yeah, big cosign to everything.
Thank you.
And then we lead into And this is I'm just going to launch here because this is my favorite track on the record, this next one.
Go
Oh,
for
it's
And-
so
it.
fucking good.
And
Oh,
I
it's so
think-
fucking good.
I think I have a lot to say about it. I think it's the most impressive, like just in terms of construction and sound, and those things I was talking about how this record sounds professional. This song and Beyond the Postcard
Yep.
Beaches are the two where I think that level of impressive professionalism shines through the most heavily for me. But yeah, musically and compositionally, Like I'm Not Even There is fucking incredible. It opens with a disorienting field recording of a busy city street. Again, you getting that reincorporation of field recordings that you heard a bit on Silver. And I like the fact that even though that field recording thing is a motif on this record, it's not something that they use on every track. It's used sparingly, and it's not a gimmick or anything like that. Like it could have been if it was
It lets you
element of
breathe
every
in
song.
between when it's implemented.
Yeah, but it's done really purposefully on this track. And I'll get into why I think that. So you have this disorienting field recording of a busy city street. It's quite overwhelming. And then it's almost like the music is growing out of this field recording at the start of the track. It fades out of it, like into the mix from that recording. It almost feels that way. And eventually it subsumes it entirely. I love the pulsing and almost bouncy bass at the start of this track, and the way that it serves as a counterpoint to the main melodic lines, which are much more kind of, there's a dissonance in them at certain points, but they're much kind of more lonesome sounding. You have counter melodies in this fucking track and varying textures that are interweaving here in a way that feels light years ahead of what the duo were just beginning to explore on 20. It could also, and what's most impressive about this track, it could so easily just feel like a mess of pretty sounds because there's a lot happening here, but it doesn't. And the development of this track is breathtaking. Eventually, that main loop gets pitch shifted and slowed, and the atmosphere in general just darkens with the disappearance of the street recording. And I am glad we haven't gotten too like conceptual here, because I didn't want this review to be like talking too much about concept. I'm glad we talked about music, but this is the point where I think the concept of the record hinted at, or the kind of feeling hinted at in that press release, really starts to impact the music in particular here. It feels like the shift in this track almost parallels the timeline that this record was created in. That you begin in this track with the bustling and noisy sounds of the world pre-quarantine when this record started to be recorded, and those sounds fall away as the piece moves to a darker, more lonely and unsettling place. The track still stays busy enough in its darkness. It reflects a kind of panic state to me, like thoughts racing as people process their new situation and their increased risk of mortality. And then there's a point where almost everything drops away for this fucking bone-chilling drone. It feels like death itself. You're just being overwhelmed by the hundreds of millions of dead. And you're feeling as isolated and scared as you've ever been. And I don't make this 2020 parallel to be cheap, but because August and Masen have outright stated it as an influence on the sound and atmosphere of this record, and this is the track where it feels as though that comes through most vividly. Though honestly, I get chills listening to this thing. It is incredible.
Yeah. Sorry. But like for me, this song feels like what it's like to go through a panic attack. And it's not just the feeling of being anxious, which so many songs that try to do that do. This for me is like the actual process of having it and then dealing with the aftermath, where it's like, and the title is so appropriate in so many ways, because one of the things that really sets me off, right, is feeling outside of someone's conception, I guess, is feeling like someone has just completely failed to consider my opinion when they do something that affects me. That really sets me off quite badly, just personally. when someone does something like I'm Not Even There, whoa, whoa, hey, right? And then it's that big explosion of thing, but then it drains away and it drains away, and then you're in your bubble, right? Especially as someone on the spectrum where you just disassociate, right? And that for me is like the second half of this track. It's like what it's like to just have to deal with the fact you've just been completely sapped of emotion and energy, and because someone else has fucked you over, right? You're just this sort of walking husk of internal turmoil with no actual like emotional capability. That's at least what that process is like for me. And this song completely captures what's that like. And it also somehow simultaneously captures what it is like to feel alone in a crowd, right? And it does both these incredibly complicated things at once, and I am in awe of it.
Yeah, it feels to me like if you're having a particularly bad spell or something, but you have to go about everything as normal despite that, and the way you sort of carry on with your life is like I'm imagining listening to this while on public transport, like the subway or a bus going to work and staring out the window. And that's like what it feels like even when you're not doing that, is just remaining in line with everything that is expected of you while continuing to go forward despite something that desperately wants to pull you off of that track. And this is the best song on the album. I'm just gonna say that if they make a better song than this, I might kill them because they're too powerful. Yeah, to get personal, very briefly, as Jake and Tyler know, but as Saoirse may have missed, I had to put down our oldest dog earlier this week. And the night before, I was listening to this album, and I went out and sat on the floor in our kitchen and just petted her for like one last long moment of affection before we had to take her in early the next day. And I was listening to this, and it was the trio of A Good Reason for Everything to Fall Apart, this, and Until We Meet Again, in that space where I was sitting with her. And it's a moment that I will cherish for the rest of my life. So if nothing else, I want the two of you to know that you created that for me in some way, and that is very, very special. Anyway,
So
good songs.
Not
So-
to, I mean, you all have spoken on like I'm Not Even There with pretty much all the praise that I think that track deserves. But I talked about a lot of the things that this album reminded me of when I was listening to it. And first thing that came to mind here, sort of with that field recording of that like street, or like it almost feels like a bus station or something. But it reminded me of specific tracks off of Selected Ambient Works, 85 and 92 in a couple of places, just especially at that beginning, that sort of like wide field recording and like just capturing of a soundscape. But this is the song that made me think of Deadwing. This is that sort of capturing that same sort of feeling of like lonely moroseness that I feel like that album radiates. And I feel like atmospherically, those like that album and this album are like siblings. There's just such a almost supernatural sense of isolation on both of them that's exemplified here, and like the structuring is perfect. Every single sound of it, it is certainly the most impressive track on here. It is simply a testament to how much I love this album and how much work August and Mason put into it that it's not my favorite. And also I'll shut up about it and save that for my favorite track, which is the next one.
Yeah, so I got a wee bit of a,
Same.
I've got a segue here. So I mean, we've all spoken beautifully on Like I'm Not Even There. But what struck me on the last few listens is that it almost seems weird for me anyway to consider that song in isolation, because I see, and I think this is especially reflected in the fact that these are the two longest tracks on the record, but to me they're almost like counterpoints to each other. They're intangibly tied at this point in the record. They are opposing but fit together. And yeah, Until We Meet Again is quite simply masterful. It has a simple Eno-esque drone. This is one of the moments where that Eno comes through. Specifically, this one reminded me of the Apollo soundtracks, which is one of Eno's most significant ambient releases. It feels like you're emerging out of the other side of the last track's lowest moments. It feels hopeful, but not naive. Bittersweet, I think, is a good way of describing it. And it's just incredibly beautiful as well. My favorite moment on the whole album is in this track, which is, and I can't explain why this affects me in the way it does, but there's a moment about 8 minutes in where this beautiful drone has been, a melodic drone has been happening, and then suddenly, very subtly, you get the intrusion of this white noise that just starts to feed into the mix of the track, and it kind of gradually gets more and more present in the final stretch of the track, although it never overwhelms it, which I think is a smart decision. And when this kind of hissing white noise kind of comes in, it just undoes me. I don't know why. It's like there is a hopefulness to this track, and then just that, because the track is so beautiful and soft and sweet, but then when this kind of ugly sound just subtly starts to penetrate, it's like you're suddenly realizing the passage of time is eroding this feeling, or like you're becoming suddenly conscious of the fact that this beautiful moment you're experiencing has to end. It's so fucking emotional. It just really gets me, the progression in this song. I have wept to this track, and I mean, it's no surprise I've wept to a lot of music in the last couple of weeks, but man, it's an incredible climax to this album.
Yeah, this is my favorite song on the album, and frankly, if there is a song I like more in the year 2021, I mean, I'm the Babe Ruth calling a shot here, but there will not be a piece of music that profoundly affects, moves, I don't fucking know what you want to call it other than this. It's interesting, Tyler, you used the phrasing that it's just like this beautiful moment and like the tragedy of it having to end. And I think that's like such a specific tone that's has to be captured for it to cause that effect. And I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. I think I guess I'll sort of put my foot in here just because this is the only thing that I can say to even convey what this track is like and how much I love it. Just because it's also just it's very full sounding and it's very all encompassing, but it's also so minimal. I think it might be the simplest track on the entire album, and following what I think is the most sonically intricate part of the album, and them sort of being at peace, like Tyler said, I think is like, it feels right. It feels like a yin and yang kind of deal, like a sort of a coldness and then a warmth that's immediately after. And I love that choice structurally. But this is something that I've learned recently that is just sort of a thing that people do. It's often common in people who are A, autistic, and B, writers, is that you just soundtrack everything you hear to a scene that you write. Just everything, like beat by beat by beat. And that's basically how I write now. That's entirely how I imagine the emotional tone of scenes and how I like write along to things. And the biggest compliment I can give a piece of music is that I take it and imagine it set to something that I'm going to make, let alone something that is incredibly emotionally evocative. It's something I haven't even fucking written yet and probably will not for years. But there is simply a moment, like I have a long story I'm making, and there's just a moment where there's this reconciliation between these two characters and acceptance of one having to move on and let them go ostensibly from their memory, from their life. And this is the sound of that scene. And it's like August and Masen channeled that from like my id and then just made it into this incredibly impressive 12-minute long song. And I it's fucking beautiful. This, I mean, again, I've only just started to get into the genre, but I have not heard a piece of ambient music that I love more than this, frankly. It stands head and shoulders above everything I've heard.
Yeah. The only piece of ambient music that affected me more than this track is currently a track on my second favorite album of the year. So go take that and eat it, August. But no, I can't remember where, if it was in the interview with Tyler or in something August told me or wherever, but I feel like somewhere in my memory, someone told me that this is a track that relates to like a real life death relating to someone one of the band members knew, but I can't confirm that.
I can contextualize that.
It's in the blurb.
Yeah, and there's a dedication specifically on the Bandcamp page of this track.
That'll be where. Yeah,
to a person who I don't know the specific relationship of the person to either August or Masen, but that dedication is there.
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's definitely where I saw it. I remember now, but
it makes so much sense in hindsight. Wow.
Listening to this track in context of that, not that it's not self-evident that that's there in the song, but knowing that it just wrecks you because the warmth of this track and just the sense of like So recently, right, I got to go to the cinema for the first time in months because lockdown has lifted here now, and I saw The Sound of Metal. And not to spoil it, but the climax of that film is somewhat about accepting changes in life and that they happen. And that there is a possible peace after it, right? And I felt similarly at the end of that movie than I have done listening to this track, of just being reminded that it is okay to deal with tragedy in a way that is positive, because that's so easy to forget, I think. That it's like perfectly fine to process tragedy and come out of it better, because when you're in the midst of it, all you want to do is feel the worst emotions possible. Once you move past it, there is a beauty there. And I feel like both these pieces of media, that film and this song, are connected in that thematic way. And it's just beautiful and really beautifully achieved.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so the final stretch of the record then, and I'm sure that from what I've heard from some of you, you'll be able to provide a nice bit of a counterpoint to me here. But I've been deliberately fawning over this album, but I do think that it should have ended on Until We Meet Again. That's my one critique of this record.
You are simply incorrect.
Which is not to say that the next two tracks are weak tracks. They're not. They're good pieces of music. Particularly Hour of Mittens, which I really like a lot. I just don't know if they fit on this album is all. And I'm sure you'll talk at length about why I'm wrong, and that's great. I love obviously the guitar sample in Hour of Mittens is gorgeous. I like the way in which that is looped and kind of layered, and then you have the piano sample intruding as well. The way the mix builds in this track is really, really nice. And then the closing track of Cracking Bones of Cracking Spirit is a very eerie sort of epilogue. It reminded me a lot of Twin Peaks and David Lynch sound design, the crackling electricity specifically, and then the backwards pitch shifted vocal sample too. These are good tracks. I don't really have too much to say about them. I feel like they would be better suited on a different project, but they're certainly not weak, and they also certainly are in the right place if they have to be on this album, because the sequencing is immaculate up to this point. I just, yeah, that's my only critique of this record, is that the last two tracks, I like them. I just think the record would be perfect if it ended just before them. That's my hot take.
This track in particular reminds me of like a more dissonant take on the guitar loop on Deftones' Teenager, which is one of my favorite songs on that album. So yeah, it works here. Although I'm not necessarily in agreement with Tyler's take on the last two songs on the album. I think there's a way to make them fit. I don't know what it is. And it's driving me nuts. Because anyway, I love this song, but I totally understand the and agree with the idea that it's a bit of a almost unnecessary switch up from the tone laid down by the three previous tracks.
What I kind of do appreciate about the decision to put those two tracks at the end is that you do get a kind of sense of emotional resolution with Until We Meet Again. But it is complicated by those last two tracks, which are a little more emotionally ambiguous, I guess, than some of the other pieces on the record. So it does kind of leave you in this strange sort of state of, I don't know what the right word is here. It's not a bad thing at all. It is a strange sort of state of, I guess, unfinishedness, but that's like not the right word. But you know what I mean? It's not something that personally works 100% for me, but I definitely can see the intention behind it, and I appreciate it on that level.
Well, if I may provide a counter as somebody who does
Sorry.
I will say I definitely understand not sort of like or just sort of wanting Until We Meet Again to close out, but the conscious decision, at least for me, the phrase I would use is that it leaves you with a bit of a lack of closure. And that was sort of something I had to figure out upon listening to the album, because I was just like, I definitely know this is a choice, because August, being the way that he is, and just from our talks of just what he values and everything, you know that August is a utilitarian person who appreciates things like structure, who appreciates things being in their right place and having a very intentional purpose behind them. And not that that necessarily has to extend to his making art, but also I just feel like it's definitely a sort of like, I had to interrogate that choice and see what did this do to me? Like, so I had to sort of step back and just kind of let it happen. And for me anyway, Until We Meet Again is sort of like for me, that's the closure and the warmth that you get motivated to overcome the final trial, which Hour of Matins, for me anyway, is sort of this very curious, very dark song that I said earlier. It reminded me of one of my favorite film scores of the last 10 years, which is Ben Salisbury's score for the film Annihilation, which is this really, really unique combination of acoustic guitars and like weird warbled electronic synths that creates this unbelievable air of menace. It's also kind of channeled here and kind of has sort of like a field recording thing going on. And this to me sort of feels like a strange counterpart to Like I'm Not Even There in many ways, is just sort of that temperance and that emotional timbre of that, like the first part of that is sort of reflected here, but there's this feeling of progression. There's like a focused part with that guitar, and then that sort of shimmering sort of wall, that entire sheet of noise that comes in and is like whoosh, and it just kind of cascades. And I just, as an aesthetic choice, I just fucking love that. But it feels like you're being guided through something, like you're returning to that place that they were at the very beginning of like I'm Not Even There, and you're being guided by it. You're taking what you have and rolling with it, and then you proceed into Of Cracking Bones and Of Cracking Spirit, which is like that sort of reversed audio too. It reminded me of I love that Tyler said Twin Peaks and sort of like an Angelo Badalamenti kind of thing. It reminded me of a very specific moment in Twin Peaks: The Return. It reminded me of episode 8 when it's sort of like zooming through that footage of when everybody's at the gas station.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like it's sort of undoing something. It's like it's reversing time. It's like it's something is being like the scene that comes to mind is there's this metaphor that they keep talking about in fucking Hannibal, that where the Hannibal keeps bringing up the idea of a teacup that's shattered being somehow reversing and then becoming whole again. And that image to me is exactly what this conjures up, of just like something being broken and like reversing to its original state. But the lack of emotional like definition here and the sort of leaving you off without closure is sort of reflective, I think, of the concept, which is the sort of like that sort of like finality you get with Until We Meet Again. It doesn't really reflect the idea to me of sort of channeling all of this energy you got from this year and sort of like, or this time period and this thing that happened to August and Mason, and then just like putting a period at the end of it, because it's like, that's just, and not to like, I know I'm looking very deeply into this and this isn't against like you guys or anything. This is literally just how I see it, but it's like, ending it with a sting of finality isn't how life works. Taking all of this and like, it's the finality and closure that you get as an artist and that is shown here is from the process of making this, and then ending it on this sort of strange note where it's like you get a form of closure for me with Of Cracking Bones, Of Cracking Spirit, is that it was achieved. There was a struggle. There was something you had to gain, and then something that guided you here. And maybe it's not like this final thing, but it's like you have in fact arrived somewhere. Maybe not where you intended to go, but you got there, and now they're sort of here, and they sort of have this sort of, they're at a crossroads in their lives. Like you said, they released this album the day high school ended. So now they have this world of possibility before them, and I think it's sort of an acknowledgement on their part of the sort of like the fear of what comes next, the sort of just unknowing. And I love that. I love the open-ended way it ends, because it's so applicable. You can imprint sort of what your own take is on it, but I feel it's sort of up to interpretation. As like, I almost do feel like Until We Meet Again is the end of the album, and this is sort of like an epilogue and an end credits subsequently, and it works for me really, really well in a way that I really wouldn't want it to change at this point, because I've just listened to this over and over, and just the way this works in my head sonically, like if it was in a different order, it would feel off to me, and the emotional tenor would be thrown off of the concept in a way that I think, like, again, it would be no less like great of an achievement or anything. But if like we're talking about the structural choices, I'm heavily in favor of this.
I like that you mentioned it as like an epilogue, because that was what I was thinking about and about to say next. To me, it doesn't sound similar, but what it reminded me of is like Cracking Bones specifically sounded like a kind of like hidden track that you would get on like a late 90s electronic album that would be preceded. It would be preceded by like 10 minutes of silence, but of course they wouldn't do that on this, because you know what they're like. What it reminded
because
me
August
of,
hates that shit and says so very frequently.
What it reminded me of specifically, even though it doesn't really sound similar, is it reminded me of how Autechre's LP5 ends. It has this incredibly huge sweeping closing track that I absolutely adore. It has these blaring synthetic horns and this percussion that's just kind of like bobbing all over the place, and then you have the silence, and then you have this kind of eerie bonus track that feels very strange and just ends the record after that silence in a really obtuse place. And this is kind of a similar feeling as well. I think your explanation of it, the way you've described it, I think has definitely had an effect on how I think about it, and probably will influence how I hear it next time.
Reminds me of another 8-song album with a very similar emotional tenor as this, which is Opeth Damnation.
I'm fucking glad somebody did it because yep.
The way in particular that it ends, especially reminds me of this.
Ending credits.
Ending credits. Well, it doesn't end with ending credits. It ends with wings.
Exactly.
Which is a choice that on early listens of that album, I was like, that was the end of the album. Yeah, all right. And now I'm just like, yes, I see the Matrix Kings. So I will leave that door open.
You know what? I'd never made that connection in my head, but that is like I feel exactly the same about Damnation as I feel about Glacier Flower 21. It's like on the fucking edge of being a 10, except for that decision towards the end, which takes me out of it a little bit. But I'm completely open to the possibility that in the case of both records, that could one day fall into place for me. And that's what's exciting about it, is that, you know,
Morgan and I'll bully you into it with both.
What's exciting about it is the feeling of possibility there. And I, in many ways, that's kind of more exciting than a record that is instantly perfect to you the first time you hear it. But yeah, I think that's a really good comp and a good place to tie up as well. So we talked about this for over an hour, which is, I think, hilarious and fitting for us. Let's move into our favorite tracks and ratings for Glacier Flower 21. We'll go reverse order since I did main order. We did main order last time. My three favorite tracks are Like I'm Not Even There, Beyond the Postcard Beaches, going to be the one to put that in my top three. And yeah, it's got to be Tristitia Ex Nihilo, I think. And least fave is Cracking Bones, Cracking Spirit. I'm giving this album a 9 out of 10.
Real good. My favorite tracks are A Good Reason for Everything to Fall Apart, Like I'm Not Even There, and Until You Meet Again, my least favorite track. I mean, they're all great, but if I'm going to choose one, it's Beyond the Postcard Beaches. I'm sorry, I still love it. And I'm giving it an 8.5 out of 10.
I will say, Like I'm Not Even There, A Good Reason for Everything to Fall Apart, and Tristitia Ex Nihilo. Least favorite of Cracking Bones, of Cracking Spirit, and I will give this a 9.
My three favorite tracks are, I'm gonna do it in order because this 3-track run is fucking goated, frankly. A Good Reason for Everything to Fall Apart, Like I'm Not Even There, an absolute favorite, Until We Meet Again. And just as an epilogue to this, I would like to say, because August is probably going to go back and watch it, as is Mason. And
Please say what I think you're gonna say.
I want to thank the both of you because this has been, hold on a minute. I want to thank the both of you for making this because I read Tyler's interview and I know how hard this was for you. And me and everybody here, this goes without saying, but I wanted to anyway. We all know what it's like to fucking work through shit and put your heart into something and make something important to you and something that you just really pour yourself into, and to just sort of like, you know, once you have it, you don't really know what to do with it. So it becomes really special when other people get to engage with it and hear it. And I want you all to know that I deeply valued my experience with this. And I, like, you know, if my words here haven't done it justice and people think I'm kissing ass, or if even you two think that I'm kissing ass, let the fact that I have fucking like 60 scrobbles for this on Last FM and have listened to this album in its entirety 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know how many times at this point. And I give this album a 10 out of 10.
Beautiful.
What I was hoping you were going to say is that your least favorite is Chinese Satellite, and it's a 10.
Oh, no, there is no least favorite track. Absolutely not.
This is a 9.1 on average, which is equivalent to, get this, Get to Heaven by Everything, White Pony by Deftones, Third Eye Blind by Third Eye Blind, 14 Autumns and 15 Winters by The Twilight Sad, and Semper Femina by Laura Marling.
And August. August is playing the long game. You know why? Motherfucker got a 0.1 decimal score higher than Phoebe Bridgers' Punisher. This is it. The whole time. This was all he wanted.
Amazing.
This is my
Respect.
design.
Rock over London, rock on Chicago. 2008 Obama presidential campaign. Yes, we can